The silver Aston Martin Valkyrie AMR Pro rolled into Rodri Motors with the quiet authority of $3 million on wheels. Harper Lancaster stepped out, her tailored suit sharp against the garage's grease-stained walls. Three senior mechanics stood around the hybrid V12 engine, shaking their heads in defeat. Nobody dared touch the complex system without factory support. Then a man in coveralls approached. Tall and quiet, brown hair, tousled hands still dirty from honest work. Mason Carter had been hired that morning. Harper raised an eyebrow as the garage owner explained this was their newest hire, a widower raising his daughter alone. Harper's laugh was cold as winter steel. "Fix this engine and I'll marry you," she said, half joking, half mocking. Everyone laughed. Mason just smiled quietly. No one knew that behind those calm eyes was a man who had once designed systems far more complex than this for military aircraft. Harper Lancaster had once believed in love, the way children believe in fairy tales with complete and trusting hearts. She had been 28 when she married Daniel Rothschild, heir to a shipping fortune, convinced their merger of hearts would last longer than any corporate acquisition. For 3 years, she built her life around their shared dreams of expanding her family's logistics company while raising children in their Connecticut mansion. She worked 16-hour days to prove herself worthy of the Rothschild name, missing dinners and weekend retreats, always promising herself that success would buy them the time to truly connect. The betrayal came on a Tuesday evening in March. Harper returned early from a business trip to surprise Daniel with his favorite wine and plans for a long overdue vacation. Instead, she found him in their bed with her assistant Sarah, the woman she had trusted with her schedules, her secrets, her entire professional life. The scene burned itself into her memory with photographic clarity. Daniel's shocked face, Sarah's desperate scramble for clothes, the rumpled sheets that Harper had picked out during their honeymoon in Italy. The divorce proceedings that followed were brutal. Daniel's lawyers painted Harper as a cold, career-obsessed woman who had neglected her marriage. The tabloids dubbed her the Ice Queen CEO, a nickname that followed her through boardrooms and charity galas. After the settlement, Harper threw herself into Lancaster Logistics with single-minded focus. She acquired 3 smaller companies, expanded into international shipping, and built a reputation for ruthless efficiency. Her success was undeniable, but it came at a cost. She stopped dating, entirely built walls around her heart, and treated romantic prospects like hostile takeover attempts. Meanwhile, Mason Carter's story unfolded in the shadows of aircraft hangars and hospital corridors. He had been the most promising engineer at Lockheed Martin, the kind of brilliant mind that could see patterns where others saw only chaos. His colleagues respected his ability to understand how thousands of parts work together. Mason had married his college sweetheart, Rebecca, a pediatric nurse with gentle hands and endless patience. They had planned their life with the careful precision of a blueprint. Career advancement, a house in the suburbs, children who would grow up secure and loved. Rebecca died 3 months after Lily was born, her body unable to recover from complications that the doctor said happened in less than 1% of cases. Mason held his newborn daughter in the hospital room where his wife had just passed away, feeling as though his entire world had collapsed. The complex problems that had once fascinated him seemed meaningless compared to the practical challenge of keeping a tiny human alive and healthy. He took extended leave, then resigned entirely, trading his promising career for whatever work would allow him to be present for his daughter. That evening, after the garage emptied and the laughter faded, Mason remained alone with the Valkyrie. He had heard the mockery in Harper Lancaster's voice, seeing the dismissive way she had looked at him, just another blue-collar worker unworthy of her attention. But Mason had also seen something else, a $3 million machine that nobody could fix, and a woman whose expensive car had become a symbol of her isolation. He approached the engine not with wounded pride, but with genuine curiosity. The car's system was a masterpiece of engineering. Most mechanics would have been intimidated by the sheer number of sensors and control modules working together. Mason saw it differently. Every system, no matter how complex, was simply a collection of individual parts that had to communicate with each other. The problem was usually in the communication, not the parts themselves. He traced electrical pathways with the patience of someone who had once designed aircraft systems, checking readings and signals with tools that seemed almost primitive compared to his former equipment. The dashboard displays showed normal readings for all major systems, but the engine computer was throwing error codes that made no sense together. Mason spent 2 hours methodically checking every connection, every wire that carried information between the engine and its electronic brain. The problem when he finally found it was elegantly simple. A voltage converter deep in the system had been installed with an incorrect ground connection. The error was so small that it hadn't triggered any obvious warning lights, but it was enough to create electrical noise that confused the engine management system. It was the kind of mistake that could happen to anyone. But finding it required the patience to check every single connection rather than relying on computers to identify the fault. Mason made the repair with careful precision, testing each step to ensure his solution wouldn't create new problems elsewhere. He cleared the error codes, ran the engine through its startup sequence, and listened to the purr of perfectly balanced machinery. The Valkyrie was running better than it had since leaving the factory. But Mason didn't wake anyone to share his accomplishment. He simply cleaned his tools, washed his hands, and went home to check on his sleeping daughter. When Harper returned the next morning, expecting another day of frustration and mechanical excuses, the Aston Martin started immediately. The dashboard showed perfect performance readings across every system. She stared at the instruments in genuine surprise, then looked around the garage for an explanation. "Who fixed it?" she asked, her voice carrying a note of curiosity that hadn't been there the day before. The garage owner started to point toward Mason, but Mason caught his eye and shook his head slightly. He continued cleaning his hands as if nothing unusual had happened. Harper found herself watching him with new interest, noticing the precision of his movements, the quiet confidence in the way he handled tools. Something about him didn't fit with the other mechanics. His hands moved with deliberate purpose, like a surgeon rather than a grease monkey. "It was you, wasn't it?" Harper approached Mason, directly, her heels clicking against the concrete floor. "You fixed my car." Mason looked up from his work, meeting her gaze directly. "Yes, ma'am. Found a loose connection that was causing electrical interference." "A loose connection. The factory technicians couldn't figure it out for weeks." Mason shrugged his shoulders, rising and falling like the tide. "Sometimes the simplest problems are the hardest to see." Harper studied him with the calculating gaze she used for business acquisitions. "What's your background? You're not just a mechanic." A shadow passed across Mason's face, brief as a cloud on a summer day. "I used to design aircraft systems. That was another life." "What happened?" "Life happened." Mason's voice was soft but firm, like a door being gently closed. "Is there anything else you need, Ms. Lancaster?" Harper recognized the boundary he had drawn. She was used to people eager to share their life stories with her, hoping for opportunity or advantage. Mason's reserve intrigued her. "I need someone with your skills," she said. "I have a collection of rare vehicles at my estate that require specialized maintenance. I'd like to offer you a position as my private mechanic. Triple your current salary plus benefits." Mason hesitated, his fingers tightening around the rag in his hand. "I appreciate the offer, Ms. Lancaster, but I have a daughter who needs me nearby. I can't commit to a position that would take me away from her." Harper hadn't expected refusal. People didn't say no to her, especially to offers of financial security. "Your daughter could come with you. I have a guest house on the property that would be yours. Set your own hours as long as the work gets done." Mason's eyes widened slightly, the only indication of his surprise. "That's generous. But my daughter has special medical needs. She has a heart condition that requires regular care." Harper felt a flicker of recognition. Her younger brother Michael had died of congenital heart disease when Harper was 22. The memory still ached like an old injury in cold weather. "I understand," she said, softer now. "My estate is 15 minutes from St. Mary's Children's Hospital, one of the best cardiac care centers on the East Coast." Mason's expression changed subtly, like sun breaking through clouds. "You've done your research." "I make it a point to know everything about potential investments," Harper replied, her business persona returning. "And you, Mr. Carter, are worth investing in. I'm not looking for charity. And I'm not offering any. I'm offering fair compensation for valuable skills." Harper held out her hand. "Do we have a deal?" Mason looked at her outstretched hand, then down at his own, still stained with grease despite his careful washing. The contrast couldn't have been more stark, her manicured fingers against his calloused palm. He wiped his hand once more on his rag before accepting her handshake. 2 weeks trial," he said. "If it doesn't work for my daughter, we walk away, no hard feelings." Harper nodded, unaccustomed to conditional agreements, but respecting his priorities. Fair enough. When can you start? I need to give notice here, make arrangements for Lily's medical records to be transferred. 2 weeks. 1 week, Harper countered, automatically the negotiator and her unable to accept his first offer. Mason's smile was small but genuine. 1 week. The following days passed in a blur of preparation. Mason arranged for Lily's medical records to be transferred to St. Mary's, gave notice at Rodri Motors, and packed their modest belongings from the small apartment they had called home since Rebecca's death. Lily, now 7 years old, approached the move with the resilient enthusiasm of childhood. Will there be other kids there, Daddy? She asked as Mason carefully packed her medications. I don't think so, Lilypad, but there's a big garden to play in and you'll have your own room. Mason tucked her favorite stuffed rabbit into her backpack. And remember, it is just for a little while to see if we like it. Lily nodded solemnly, her blue eyes serious in her pale face. Because if my heart doesn't like it, we go home. Mason's own heart squeezed painfully in his chest. That's right, sweetheart. Your heart gets the final vote. When they arrived at the Lancaster estate, Mason was prepared for luxury, but still found himself taken aback by the scale of Harper's world. The main house stood like a monument to success, all glass and stone and precise angles. The garage was larger than some airplane hangars he had worked in, housing a collection of vehicles worth more than most people would earn in several lifetimes. The guest house, though smaller than the main residence, was still larger than any home Mason had ever lived in. Lily ran from room to room, her excitement momentarily overwhelming her usual physical limitations. Slow down, Lilypad, Mason cautioned, monitoring her color and breathing. Remember what Dr. Chen said about getting too excited. Lily slowed obediently, but her eyes still sparkled. Daddy, my room has a window seat. I can read there and watch the birds. Mason smiled, grateful for her joy. That sounds perfect. Indeed it does, came Harper's voice from the doorway. She stood there in casual clothes, dark jeans, and a simple blouse, looking more approachable than she had in the garage, but still radiating the unconscious authority of someone accustomed to command. Lily turned suddenly shy in the presence of this elegant stranger. Hello, she said in a small voice. Thank you for our house. Harper's expression softened in a way Mason hadn't seen before. She knelt down to Lily's level, her movements careful as if approaching a woodland creature that might startle. You're very welcome, Lily. I hope you'll be happy here. I like the window seat, Lily offered. I'm glad. I used to sit in window seats when I was your age, too. Harper's smile held a hint of nostalgia. I thought they were magical places. Lily's eyes widened. They are like little houses inside houses. Harper nodded seriously. Exactly right. Mason watched this exchange with surprise. The cold businesswoman from the garage had vanished, replaced by someone who knew how to speak to a child on her own terms. It was an unexpected glimpse behind Harper's carefully constructed walls. The moment passed quickly. Harper stood and resumed her efficient manner. I've had the kitchen stocked with basics. There's a folder on the counter with information about the property security codes and local services. The garage is accessible from the side door using your key card. Take today to settle in. Tomorrow I can show you the vehicles you'll be working with. Mason nodded. Thank you, Miss Lancaster. Harper, she corrected. If we're going to be working together, Miss Lancaster seems unnecessarily formal. Harper, Mason acknowledged, and I'm Mason. I know. She gave him a look that reminded him she made it her business to know everything about her investments. Dinner is at 7 in the main house, if you and Lily would like to join me. Nothing formal. Before Mason could respond, Harper had turned and was walking back toward the main house, her posture perfect, her stride purposeful. She's pretty, Lily observed, but she looks sad in her eyes, like Mrs. Peterson at school when she talks about her son who went to heaven. Out of the mouths of babes, Mason thought. Sometimes people carry sadness with them, Lilypad, just like you carry Mr. Whiskers everywhere. He nodded at her stuffed rabbit. Maybe she needs a Mr. Whiskers too, Lily suggested seriously. Mason laughed, lifting her into his arms. Maybe what she needs is friends. Should we go to dinner and be friendly? Lily nodded solemnly. We should bring cookies. Cookies make everyone feel better. That evening, Mason and Lily arrived at the main house with a plate of store-bought cookies. Harper opened the door herself, surprising Mason, who had expected household staff. We brought cookies, Lily announced, holding up the plate. Because everyone feels better with cookies. Harper blinked, clearly taken aback by the offering. That's thoughtful. Thank you, Lily. She accepted the plate with the careful precision of someone handling an unfamiliar object. Please come in. The interior of the main house matched its exterior, elegant, expensive, and oddly impersonal. It resembled a high-end hotel suite more than a home, with no family photos, no clutter, no evidence of a life being lived rather than a space being occupied. Dinner was served in a dining room that could have comfortably seated 20. The meal itself was simple but perfect: roast chicken, vegetables, fresh bread. Harper had clearly made concessions for a child's palate. Did you cook this? Mason asked, genuinely curious about whether the polished CEO knew her way around a kitchen. Harper shook her head. I have a service that delivers meals. I can heat and serve, but cooking has never been my strong suit. Daddy cooks everything, Lily volunteered. He makes heart-shaped pancakes on Sundays. That sounds wonderful, Harper said, her voice soft. My father used to make Sunday breakfast too. Used to, Mason asked. He died 5 years ago. Heart attack. Harper's words were clipped factual, but her fingers tightened around her water glass. The company was his life's work. Now it's mine. I'm sorry for your loss, Mason said simply. Thank you. Harper changed the subject smoothly. Tell me about your experience with high-performance vehicles. Your previous employer's records indicate you've only worked as a general mechanic for the past 3 years. Mason recognized the shift to safer ground. I understand systems. Whether it's an aircraft or a car, the principles are similar. Power generation control systems, structural integrity. The scales and specifics change, but the fundamentals remain constant. Interesting perspective. Most specialists I've encountered are quite territorial about their expertise. Territoriality is a luxury I can't afford, Mason said. When you need to provide for someone else, you learn to apply what you know in whatever way pays the bills. Harper studied him across the table. That's a remarkably pragmatic attitude. Life requires pragmatism. Mason replied automatically, checking Lily's plate to ensure she was eating her vegetables. Idealism doesn't pay medical bills. Harper's expression shifted subtly. No, it doesn't. She turned to Lily. Do you like school, Lily? Lily nodded, her mouth full of chicken. She swallowed before answering. I like reading and art. Math is hard sometimes. Math was hard for me too at your age, Harper admitted, but it became my favorite subject later. Really? Lily looked dubious. Daddy says numbers are just tools like his wrenches. Your daddy is right, Harper said. They're tools that help us build understanding, just like wrenches help build engines. Mason watched this interaction with growing curiosity. The Harper Lancaster, who spoke gently to his daughter, seemed worlds apart from the Ice Queen CEO he had heard about. It was as if she became a different person when talking to Lily, softer, more accessible, more human. After dinner, Harper showed them her library, a 2-story room lined with bookshelves that made Lily gasp with delight. You have more books than the school library. Harper smiled, running her fingers along the spines of a shelf of classics. Books were my friends growing up. We moved often for my father's business, so it was hard to keep human friends. Books traveled with me. We have to be careful with Lily's books, Mason explained. Hospital stays mean we sometimes need to pack quickly. We keep it to one small bookshelf. Something flickered in Harper's eyes, understanding perhaps, or recognition. Lily, would you like to borrow books while you're here? You could take as many as you like back to the guest house. Lily's face lit up like a sunrise. Really, any of them? Any that interest you, Harper confirmed, though perhaps your father should help you reach the higher shelves. Mason watched as Lily began examining the lower shelves with reverent fingers, carefully pulling out volumes that caught her interest. He turned to Harper. That's very generous. Harper shrugged, the gesture at odds with her usual precision. Books should be read, not displayed. My father believed knowledge unshared was knowledge wasted. Your father sounds like a wise man. He was, Harper said, a hint of grief coloring her voice. Not always an easy man, but a wise one. As Lily selected her books, Harper led Mason through a side door in the library. This is my office. Tomorrow I'll show you the garage and the vehicles, but there's something else I'd like your opinion on first. Harper's office was as precise as she was, everything in its place, nothing extraneous. One wall was covered with screens displaying shipping routes, stock prices, and news headlines. Another held engineering drawings and technical specifications for what appeared to be a transportation system of some kind. "What am I looking at?" Mason asked, studying the drawings with professional interest. "A problem," Harper replied. "Lancaster Logistics is developing an emergency response system for natural disasters, a way to deliver critical supplies to areas where traditional infrastructure has been compromised. We've hit some technical roadblocks." Mason moved closer to the drawings, his engineer's mind automatically analyzing the designs. "These look like modified delivery systems, but on a much larger scale." "Essentially, yes, but we're having issues with the guidance systems in adverse weather conditions. The current design fails in high winds and heavy precipitation, precisely the conditions most common during natural disasters." Mason's fingers traced the diagrams, his mind already identifying potential issues. "Have you considered a backup navigation system? Something that doesn't rely solely on GPS or visual markers?" Harper watched him closely. "That's exactly the direction our team is pursuing, but we're struggling with the implementation. The weight constraints are significant." Mason nodded absently, his focus on the problem rather than the conversation. "You'd need something lightweight but strong, possibly a ground-based reference network that communicates with the vehicles." He trailed off, suddenly aware that he had stepped well beyond his role as a mechanic. "I'm sorry, I got carried away." "Don't apologize for competence," Harper said sharply. "That's exactly the kind of thinking we need." Mason stepped back from the diagrams, his guard rising again. "I was hired to maintain your vehicles, Harper, not consult on corporate projects. And if I want to expand the scope of your employment, I'd need to understand why." Mason's voice was calm but firm. "I've learned to be cautious about opportunities that seem too good to be true." Harper's expression tightened, then relaxed with what appeared to be a conscious effort. "Fair enough. The truth is, I recognized your name from the beginning. Your work on navigation systems at Lockheed Martin was groundbreaking. When I saw you at Rodri Motors, I was curious about why someone with your qualifications was working as a mechanic." Mason's jaw tightened. "You knew who I was all along. The job offer wasn't about the Valkyrie. The job offer was about potential. Yours and mine." Harper held his gaze without flinching. "I need someone who understands complex systems and can think beyond conventional solutions. The vehicles are real, and I do need them maintained. But yes, I had hoped your expertise might extend to other projects as well." Mason felt a familiar weight settle in his chest, the burden of expectations he had deliberately left behind when he walked away from his engineering career. "I left that world for a reason, Harper." "Your daughter," Harper said softly. "I understand prioritizing family. I respect it, actually. But what if you could do both? Work that challenges your mind with hours that allow you to be there for Lily and compensation that would cover her medical needs without constant financial stress." The offer hung in the air between them, tempting in its practicality. Mason thought of Lily's medical bills piling up on the kitchen table in their apartment, of the treatments they had postponed because of cost, of the constant worry about providing for her future if her condition worsened. "I'd need to think about it," he said finally. "This is more than I expected when I accepted your offer." Harper nodded. "Take all the time you need. The position as my mechanic stands regardless. This would be additional, if you're interested." From the library came the sound of Lily's delighted laughter. Both adults turned toward the sound, drawn by its simple joy. "She found the illustrated fairy tales," Harper said, her voice unexpectedly gentle. "They were my favorites as a child." Mason studied Harper's face as she listened to Lily's laughter. For a moment, the businesswoman's mask slipped, revealing something vulnerable beneath. He wondered suddenly about the woman behind the CEO, about what had shaped her into someone who lived alone in this beautiful empty house, filled with expensive things but no voices. "Lily has a way of bringing Mari into any room," Mason said. "Yes, she does." Harper's smile was brief but genuine. "You've done well with her despite difficult circumstances." "I've done my best," Mason replied. "Some days that feels like enough. And the days it doesn't," Mason looked at her directly, "those are the days I remind myself that everyone's just trying to fix what's broken with the tools they have available." Harper held his gaze for a long moment. "Some things can't be fixed, Mason. Maybe not, he acknowledged, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. The week that followed fell into an unexpected rhythm. During the days, Mason familiarized himself with Harper's collection of rare and exotic vehicles, developing maintenance schedules and performing needed repairs. In the afternoons, he spent time with Lily, who had discovered the joy of reading in the garden of their temporary home. Harper was often absent, running her global logistics empire from her office or from various meetings around the city, but she joined them for dinner most evenings, gradually relaxing into conversations that ranged beyond business and mechanics. Mason learned that Harper had grown up moving between various cities as her father expanded his shipping business, that she had studied economics and engineering at MIT, graduating at the top of her class, that she had once dreamed of designing transportation systems for developing nations before family obligations pulled her into the corporate world. Harper, in turn, discovered that Mason had grown up in a small town in Ohio, the son of a factory worker who had encouraged his interest in how things worked, that he had earned scholarships that took him to Georgia Tech where he met Rebecca, that he still maintained a notebook of designs and ideas, though he rarely had time to develop them anymore. Lily served as a bridge between them, her innocent questions and observations often cutting through the barriers of class and experience that might otherwise have kept them apart. She treated Harper with the same unguarded friendliness she showed everyone unintimidated by wealth or status. On the fifth day, Harper came home earlier than usual, finding Mason in the garage examining the undercarriage of her vintage Jaguar E-Type. "How's the patient?" she asked, setting her briefcase on a workbench. Mason slid out from under the car, a smudge of grease on his forehead. "Beautiful machine. Whoever maintained it previously knew what they were doing." "That would be my father," Harper said, running her hand along the car's sleek body. "This was his favorite. He taught me to drive in this car when I was 16. "Quite the driving instructor," Mason commented, standing and wiping his hands. "Most parents start their kids in something a bit more forgiving." Harper's laugh was unexpected and genuine. He said, "If I learned on this, I'd respect every vehicle I ever drove afterward." He was right. Mason noticed she was dressed more casually than usual, dark jeans and a simple blouse instead of her typical business attire. "You're home early. I thought Lily might like to visit the botanical gardens. They have a butterfly exhibit that's quite spectacular." Harper spoke casually, but Mason caught the slight tension in her shoulders, as if she were preparing for rejection. "That's thoughtful of you," Mason said. "She'd love that. Her energy has been good today." Relief flickered across Harper's face. "Excellent. I've arranged for a picnic as well, if that suits her diet restrictions." Mason studied Harper with new curiosity. "Can I ask you something?" "You can ask. I reserve the right not to answer." "Fair enough," Mason conceded. "Why are you doing this? The job, the house now, and outing with Lily. It seems like a lot of effort for someone who's just a temporary employee." Harper was silent for a long moment, her fingers still tracing the curve of the Jaguar's fender. "I had a younger brother," she said finally. "Michael. He had a congenital heart condition similar to Lily's. He died when he was 9. I was 22. Understanding dawned in Mason's eyes. "I'm sorry, Harper." "It was a long time ago," she said, her voice carefully controlled. "But when I see Lily, well, Michael would have been about your age now if he had lived. Sometimes I wonder what kind of man he would have become." The vulnerability in her admission hung in the air between them, fragile as a soap bubble. Mason resisted the urge to offer empty comfort, sensing she would reject it. "Thank you for telling me," he said simply. Harper nodded, composure returning like a shield being raised. "So the botanical gardens, shall we say, in an hour?" "We'll be ready," Mason promised. The botanical gardens were a revelation. Lily flitted from exhibit to exhibit with careful excitement, mindful of her limitations, but unable to contain her wonder at the butterflies that sometimes landed on her outstretched fingers. Harper matched her pace without complaint, answering questions and pointing out interesting species with unexpected knowledge. Mason followed slightly behind, watching the unlikely pair, his daughter in her simple dress, with its practical pockets filled with treasures, and the billionaire CEO in designer casual wear, worth more than his monthly salary. They made an odd picture, but there was something right about it too, as if each filled a space in the other's life that had been empty for too long. During their picnic on a secluded lawn, Lily fell asleep between them, tired from the excursion, but peacefully content. Mason watched her breathing, the habit of a parent who had spent too many nights worried about each rise and fall of his child's chest. She looks like you when she sleeps, Harper observed quietly. Everyone says she looks like her mother, Mason replied. Same blue eyes, same delicate features. Perhaps physically, but that expression, that little furrow between her eyebrows, that's all you. Mason smiled, gently smoothing Lily's hair. Rebecca would have loved this place. She always said hospitals needed more butterflies and fewer beeping machines. She sounds wise, Harper said. How long were you together? 12 years. High school sweethearts who actually made it work. Mason's voice held wonder even now. At least for a while. That's rare. Yes, Mason agreed. We were lucky. Even with how it ended, I still count myself lucky to have had those years. Harper was quiet for a moment. I was married once. It lasted 3 years. I heard, Mason admitted. The garage guys filled me in on Lancaster Logistics' famous Ice Queen CEO. Harper's laugh held no humor. Yes, well, tabloids need their narratives. Betrayed wife becomes cold-hearted business tyrant. It sells papers. Is that how you see yourself, cold-hearted? Harper plucked a blade of grass, examining it with false interest. I see myself as someone who learned an expensive lesson about trust. I paid for that education. I might as well apply what I learned. Which is, that business is reliable. Emotions are not. She looked at him directly. People disappoint you, Mason. Companies at least have predictable motivations. Mason met her gaze steadily. People can surprise you too, sometimes in good ways. Rarely in my experience. Then you've been meeting the wrong people, Mason said simply. The conversation might have continued, but Lily stirred between them, her eyes fluttering open. Did I fall asleep? She asked, her voice thick with drowsiness. Just for a little while, Lilypad, Mason assured her. You didn't miss anything important. Harper watched their interaction with an expression Mason couldn't quite read. Something between longing and resignation, as if witnessing something beautiful that she had accepted would never be hers. The drive back to the estate was quiet, Lily dozing again in the backseat of Harper's Mercedes SUV, Mason watching the landscape pass outside his window. I've been thinking about your offer, he said finally, the consulting work on the emergency response system. Harper kept her eyes on the road. And I'd like to try, on a trial basis with clear boundaries about hours and expectations. He could see the slight upturn of her lips, satisfaction rather than triumph. I'll have contracts drawn up tomorrow. Your input would be valuable on the guidance systems in particular. I have some ideas about that, Mason admitted. Weather-resistant navigation that doesn't rely solely on satellites or visual cues. I look forward to hearing them. Harper's tone was professional, but Mason caught the genuine enthusiasm underneath. This project mattered to her personally, not just as a business venture. That night, after putting Lily to bed, Mason sat at the small desk in his room and opened his notebook of designs for the first time in months. Ideas that had been dormant began to stir again, possible solutions to the problems Harper had described taking shape under his pencil. It felt both familiar and strange, like returning to a hometown after years away, recognizable but altered by time and perspective. He had deliberately set aside this part of himself when Rebecca died, focusing on all his energy on being a father to Lily. But now, with the pages filling with diagrams and calculations, he realized how much he had missed the challenge of solving complex problems. As he worked, rain began to fall outside, a gentle summer shower that tapped against the windows of the guest house. The sound formed a soothing backdrop to his thoughts, a reminder of the world continuing its cycles regardless of human concerns. Mason didn't notice the hours passing until he looked up to find it was past midnight. He stretched, feeling muscles protest from too long in one position. As he prepared for bed, he found himself thinking of Harper. Not the businesswoman, but the person who had shared stories about her father, who had shown such gentle patience with Lily, who had revealed the pain of losing her brother. The public persona of the Ice Queen seemed increasingly at odds with the woman he was coming to know. He wondered which version was closer to her true self, or if perhaps both were simply different facets of a complex person shaped by experiences, both good and bad. The next morning, Mason met with Harper's engineering team, presenting his ideas for the guidance system. His approach was practical rather than theoretical, using existing infrastructure as navigation reference points, combined with a simplified inertial system that would function even when primary systems failed. The key is redundancy without complexity, he explained, sketching on a whiteboard as the team watched. Every additional system creates new points of failure. We need backup systems that work on completely different principles, so that whatever takes down one won't affect the others. The lead engineer, a young man with an MIT pedigree and the confident manner of someone who had never faced real failure, seemed skeptical. That's overly simplistic. We've been working with advanced satellite mapping and which fails in heavy cloud cover. Mason interrupted gently. I'm not suggesting replacing your primary systems. I'm suggesting adding backup systems that can't be affected by the same problems. Like what exactly? The young engineer challenged. Mason drew a simple diagram. Old-fashioned radio triangulation combined with barometric altitude sensing. Primitive by today's standards, but nearly impossible to jam or confuse. Military aircraft used similar systems for decades before GPS existed. That's actually brilliant in its simplicity, admitted an older engineer who had been quiet until now. We've been so focused on cutting-edge technology that we overlooked proven solutions. The meeting continued for hours with Mason's practical experience complementing the team's theoretical knowledge. By the end, they had outlined a hybrid guidance system that combined the best of modern technology with time-tested backup methods. As the team filed out, Harper remained behind, watching Mason with new respect. You handled that well. Jason doesn't usually accept outside input so graciously. Mason shrugged. He's young, reminds me of myself at that age, convinced I had all the answers. What changed life, Mason said simply. Failure teaches you humility. Success teaches you confidence. You need both to be effective. Harper nodded thoughtfully. The team seems energized by your ideas. How does it feel to be back in engineering? Good, Mason admitted. Better than I expected. Though I kept thinking about practical applications rather than theoretical elegance, that's new for me. Before I was all about pushing boundaries. Now I'm more concerned with reliability, simplicity solutions that won't leave people stranded when they need help most. Parenthood changes perspectives, Harper observed. Yes, it does. Mason gathered his notes. Speaking of which, I should check on Lily. Mrs. Chen is with her, but I try not to be away too long. Of course. Harper hesitated, then added, would you and Lily like to join me for dinner again tonight? I enjoyed our conversation yesterday. Mason smiled. We'd like that. Lily's been talking about your library all morning. I think she's planning to ask for more book recommendations. I'd be happy to oblige, Harper said, a genuine warmth in her voice that Mason was beginning to recognize as her real self, not the carefully constructed business persona she showed to the world. As Mason walked back to the guest house, he reflected on how quickly his life had changed. A week ago, he had been a mechanic struggling to make ends meet, worried about Lily's medical bills, living a life deliberately narrowed to manage his responsibilities. Now he was consulting on engineering projects again, living on a millionaire's estate, watching his daughter flourish in new surroundings. It felt precarious, like standing on a bridge that might not bear his weight. But for the first time in years, he was looking forward, rather than just getting through each day. The future had possibilities again, not just obligations. When he reached the guest house, he found Lily and Mrs. Chen in the garden reading together under the shade of an old oak tree. Lily looked up at his approach, her face lighting with a smile that still took his breath away with its resemblance to Rebecca's. Daddy, Mrs. Chen knows all about butterflies. She says the ones in the garden are monarchs, and they travel thousands of miles every year. Mason sat beside them on the blanket spread on the grass. Is that so? That's quite a journey for such small wings. They know exactly where to go without any maps, Lily said with wonder. Mrs. Chen says they have tiny compasses in their heads. Nature is full of amazing navigation systems, Mason agreed, thinking of the guidance project he'd just been discussing. Sometimes the best solutions were already all around them if people just paid attention. That evening at dinner, the conversation flowed more easily than before. Harper seemed more relaxed, less guarded. She told stories about her travels for the business, describing remote ports and bustling markets in ways that captivated Lily. Mason shared anecdotes from his engineering days, carefully edited to emphasize the problem-solving rather than the military applications. So you figured out why the plane was getting lost? Lily asked, following a story about a navigation system that had been malfunctioning during test flights. Eventually, Mason nodded. Turned out the problem wasn't in the system itself, but in how it was mounted in the aircraft. Tiny vibrations from the engines were affecting the readings. Sometimes the problem isn't where you expect it to be. Like in Ms. Harper's car, Lily observed, the loose wire was hiding. Exactly like that, Harper agreed, smiling at Lily's insight. Your daddy is very good at finding hidden problems. That's because he looks at everything, Lily said with the absolute confidence of childhood. Not just the broken part, but the whole thing. Mason felt a surge of pride at his daughter's perception. She had always been observant, noticing details that others missed. It was one of the qualities that reminded him most of Rebecca, who had been able to sense a patient's distress before monitors showed any change. After dinner, as had become their habit, they moved to the library. Lily settled in a window seat with a new book, while Mason and Harper spoke quietly by the fireplace, though the summer evening required no flames. Your daughter is remarkably perceptive, Harper commented, sipping a glass of wine. She sees connections that most adults would miss. She's always been that way, Mason agreed. Even as a toddler, she could find patterns in everything in the way clouds moved, how birds gathered before a storm. Rebecca called it her superpower. It is a kind of superpower, Harper said thoughtfully. Seeing the world as it actually is, not as we expect it to be. Most people filter everything through preconceptions. They miss what's right in front of them because it doesn't fit their expectations. Like me working as a mechanic, Mason suggested. Harper nodded. Exactly. I'm embarrassed to admit I nearly made that mistake myself, seeing the coveralls rather than the mind behind them. But you didn't not completely. You saw enough to make me an offer. I recognized something familiar, Harper admitted. A certain precision in how you moved, how you approached problems. My father had that same quality. He could look at a shipping operation and immediately identify the bottlenecks that others had overlooked for years. The ability to see systems rather than just components, Mason suggested. Yes, it's rare and valuable. Harper set down her wine glass. Which brings me to something I've been meaning to discuss with you. Mason raised an eyebrow, hearing a shift in her tone. That sounds ominous. Not at all. Quite the opposite, in fact. Harper leaned forward slightly. The Emergency Response System project is gathering momentum. Your contributions have accelerated our timeline significantly. I'd like to formalize your role as lead engineering consultant with appropriate compensation and equity in the project's eventual commercialization. Mason blinked, caught off guard by the offer. Equity, that's substantial. It's appropriate, Harper countered. Your solutions have already saved us months of development time and millions in testing. I believe in rewarding value creation. Mason glanced over at Lily, still absorbed in her book. I'd need to review the details, of course. My priority remains flexible hours and stability for Lily. Naturally, the agreement would include those provisions explicitly. Harper hesitated, then added, I've also taken the liberty of arranging a consultation with Dr. Margaret Chen at St. Mary's. She's the leading pediatric cardiologist on the East Coast, specializing in cases like Lily's. Mason stiffened slightly. Harper, I appreciate the thought, but Lily's medical care is entirely your decision, Harper finished for him. The consultation is merely an option, not a requirement. Dr. Chen is difficult to access. Her waiting list is typically 6 months or longer. I simply made an introduction available, should you wish to take advantage of it. Mason studied Harper's face, looking for signs of overstepping or control, but saw only genuine concern. Thank you, he said finally. That's thoughtful. I'll consider it. That's all I ask. Harper seemed relieved by his response. Now about the formal agreement, I'll have legal draw up papers for your review tomorrow. No pressure to sign immediately. As they continued discussing the details, Mason felt a growing sense that they had crossed some threshold. This was no longer just a temporary arrangement or a trial period. Harper was inviting him into a partnership of sorts, professional certainly, but with personal dimensions that neither of them had fully acknowledged. The conversation was interrupted by a soft chime from Harper's phone. She glanced at it, her expression darkening instantly. Everything all right? Mason asked, noticing the change. Just business, Harper replied. The warmth in her voice replaced by the cooler tone he recognized from their first meeting. Nothing that can't wait until morning. But something had shifted. The easy companionship of moments before had given way to a tension that filled the room like a change in barometric pressure before a storm. Harper's posture had subtly changed, her shoulders squaring as if preparing for conflict. Mason recognized the signs. He had seen them in himself often enough during Rebecca's illness, when bad news arrived and he had to maintain composure for Lily's sake. Something in that message had disturbed Harper deeply, though she was trying not to show it. "It's getting late," Mason said, giving her an opportunity for privacy. "Lily and I should probably head back to the guest house." Harper seemed about to protest, then nodded. "Of course, we all have an early start tomorrow." As Mason gathered Lily and her books, he noticed Harper already typing rapidly on her phone, her brow furrowed in concentration. Whatever the message contained, it clearly required immediate attention. Walking back to the guest house under a sky brilliant with stars, Mason carried a sleepy Lily in his arms. Her head rested against his shoulder, her breathing deep and even. In moments like this, the complications of adult life, career decisions, business negotiations, unstated feelings seemed distant and unimportant compared to the simple miracle of his daughter's heartbeat against his chest. Yet as he looked back at the main house, seeing Harper's silhouette in the library window, phone pressed to her ear, now he felt an unexpected concern for her. Despite her wealth and power, she stood alone, facing whatever challenge had emerged without anyone to share the burden. Mason had learned through Rebecca's illness and death that even the strongest people needed support sometimes. He wondered if Harper had ever allowed herself to need anyone since her divorce, or if she had convinced herself that independence and isolation were the same thing. As he tucked Lily into bed and kissed her forehead, Mason found himself hoping that whatever storm was brewing in Harper's world wouldn't wash away the fragile connections that had begun to form between them. Not just for his sake or even for the professional opportunity she offered, but for hers as well. Because for all her success and strength, Harper Lancaster seemed to be missing the one thing that had saved Mason after his world collapsed: the healing power of genuine human connection, of allowing someone else to matter more than pride or pain or the past. The morning arrived with the quiet efficiency of expensive machinery. Sunlight streamed through the guest house windows, casting golden rectangles across Lily's sleeping face. Mason watched her breathe for a moment, the ritual observation of a father who had spent too many nights fearing each breath might be her last. Today her color was good, her sleep peaceful. He moved through his morning routine with practiced motions, brewing coffee strong enough to fuel the day ahead. Through the kitchen window, he noticed unusual activity at the main house. Black town cars arriving, men in suits entering with the purposeful stride of people who measured time in dollars rather than hours. Something was happening. Something important enough to bring business to Harper's sanctuary on a Saturday morning. The storm clouds he had sensed the previous night were gathering. Mason's phone buzzed with a text message from Harper. "Meeting running long. Engineering team waiting in garage. Contracts on workbench for your review. Apologies." No mention of the visitors or the reason for the meeting. The warmth of the previous evening had been replaced by professional brevity. Mason felt a twinge of disappointment, but pushed it aside. Harper owed him no explanations about her business affairs. After ensuring Lily was settled with Mrs. Chen, Mason made his way to the garage. The engineering team was indeed waiting, laptops open, expressions eager. They had taken his ideas and expanded them overnight, developing simulations that showed promising results for the hybrid guidance system. The radio triangulation backup works even in simulated hurricane conditions. Jason reported his initial skepticism replaced by cautious enthusiasm. "We'll need to test with actual hardware, of course, but the models look good." Mason nodded, studying the simulation data. "What about power requirements? In disaster zones, we can't count on consistent electrical supply." "That's where we hit a snag," admitted the older engineer, whose name Mason had learned was Howard. "The current power systems aren't efficient enough for extended operation on backup alone." Mason frowned, considering the problem. "What if we integrated small-scale wind turbines into the design? In storm conditions, wind is one resource we'd have in abundance." The team exchanged looks, the idea clearly novel to them. Jason began typing, rapidly modifying the simulation parameters. It could work, but implementation would be challenging. Sometimes the most elegant solutions come from working with natural forces rather than against them, Mason said, remembering principles he had applied in aircraft design years earlier. As the morning progressed, Mason lost himself in the familiar rhythm of engineering problem-solving. The team was talented but inexperienced with real-world constraints. They designed for ideal conditions. Mason designed for failure states. Together, they were making genuine progress. It was nearly noon when Harper appeared in the garage doorway. Her business suit was impeccable as always, but Mason noticed the tightness around her eyes, the slight pallor beneath her perfect makeup. The meeting had not gone well. "How's it coming?" she asked, her voice carrying the forced brightness of someone compartmentalizing stress. "Making good progress," Mason replied, keeping his tone neutral. "The team's implementing some modifications to the power systems that should improve reliability and extended operations." Harper nodded, glancing at the simulations running on the team's laptops. "Excellent. Jason, I need the latest projection reports by end of day. Howard, coordinate with manufacturing on the prototype timeline adjustments." The team murmured acknowledgments, already gathering their equipment. They recognized a dismissal when they heard one filing out with brief goodbyes. When they were alone, Harper's shoulders dropped a fraction of an inch, the closest thing to slumping her perfect posture would allow. She moved to the vintage Jaguar E-Type and ran her hand along its curved fender, the gesture almost unconscious, as if the contact with something solid and reliable steadied her. "Rough meeting?" Mason asked, wiping engine grease from his hands. Harper's laugh held no humor. "You could say that." She hesitated, then added, "My ex-husband has made a competing bid for the Disaster Response System contract with the Federal Emergency Management Agency." Mason leaned against the workbench. "Can he do that? I thought this was Lancaster Logistics project." "The core concept was developed here, yes, but Daniel's company, Rothschild Shipping, has apparently been developing their own version." Harper's fingers tightened on the car's fender. "According to their proposal, their system will be operational 6 months before ours and at 20% lower cost. Is that possible?" "No," Harper said flatly. "Not unless they've somehow made a technological breakthrough we're unaware of, or they've had access to your research." Mason finished the thought. Harper's eyes met his sharp, with something between approval and suspicion. "Precisely, which raises uncomfortable questions about information security." Mason straightened, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the climate-controlled garage. "You think someone on your team is feeding information to Rothschild?" It wasn't a question, but Harper nodded anyway. "The timing is too convenient. Daniel's proposal incorporates solutions to problems we only identified last month." "Have you confronted him?" "That would be counterproductive at this stage." Harper's voice had taken on the precise, measured quality Mason recognized as her business persona, fully engaging. "Better to identify the source of the leak first." Mason thought of the contracts waiting on the workbench, the formal agreement, making him part of Harper's team, tying his financial future to the success of the project. The timing suddenly seemed suspect. "Is that why you accelerated the timeline on my contract?" he asked quietly. "To see if information about my involvement leaks to your ex-husband?" Harper's eyes widened slightly, the only indication that he had surprised her. "You think I'm using you as bait?" "It would be a logical move," Mason said, keeping his voice neutral. "Bring in an outside expert with a unique approach. See if that approach mysteriously appears in your competitor's proposal." "I'm not playing chess with your career, Mason." Harper's voice held an edge of genuine anger. "I offered you the position because you're uniquely qualified. The fact that we're facing unexpected competition doesn't change that." Mason studied her face, looking for signs of deception. What he saw instead was exhaustion layered over determination, the expression of someone fighting battles on multiple fronts. "I believe you," he said finally, "but you have to admit the timing raises questions." Harper sighed, some of the rigid professionalism leaving her posture. "Fair enough. In your position, I'd be suspicious too." She moved away from the car, pacing the garage with restless energy. "The truth is, I need your expertise now more than ever. If Rothschild beats us to market with an inferior system, people could die. This isn't just about business competition." Mason remembered what she had told him about her brother Michael, about the project being a tribute to him in some way. This wasn't just professional for Harper. It was personal. "I'll look over the contracts," he said. "But first tell me exactly what we're up against. What does Rothschild know, and what does he still need to figure out?" Relief flickered across Harper's face quickly, masked by professional focus. "Let's go to my office. I'll show you their proposal, or at least what we know of it. It was part of this morning's emergency board meeting." As they walked from the garage to the main house, Mason noticed the black town cars were gone. The emergency had been contained, at least temporarily. The summer day was perfect: blue sky, gentle breeze, birds calling from the manicured gardens, in stark contrast to the tension radiating from Harper's rigid shoulders. Inside her office, Harper pulled up digital copies of documents on the wall screens. This is what we've gathered about Rothschild's proposal. Note the navigation system specifications in particular. Mason studied the technical details, his engineer's mind automatically comparing them to what he had been working on with Harper's team. The similarities were undeniable, but there were critical differences, two shortcuts and compromises that suggested incomplete understanding. They have the basic concept, he observed, but they're missing key elements of the implementation, particularly the redundant systems we've been developing. Can they make it work without those elements? Harper asked, watching him closely. Mason frowned, considering. In ideal conditions, probably, but in the kinds of environments this system will face, hurricanes, earthquakes, floods, they'd see significant failure rates. Their backup systems aren't robust enough. Harper nodded, a hint of relief in her expression. That's what our team concluded as well. But the government procurement officers evaluating the proposals may not grasp those distinctions without real-world testing data, which neither of you have yet, Mason pointed out. Exactly, it becomes a matter of technical reputation and projected timelines. Harper's mouth tightened. Areas where Daniel excels. He's always been persuasive with decision makers. Mason continued studying the specifications, looking for weaknesses or opportunities. There's something odd about their power supply approach. They're claiming extended operational capacity that doesn't match their battery specifications. Harper moved closer, examining the section he indicated. You're right. Those numbers don't align with current battery technology limitations. Unless, Mason's mind raced through possibilities, unless they've found a way to harvest environmental energy more efficiently than anyone else has managed. But that would be a significant breakthrough. Or they're being deliberately optimistic in their projections. Harper suggested, her tone making it clear which explanation she favored. Mason shook his head. Federal contracts have verification requirements. They couldn't get away with pure fabrication. A new thought struck him, connections forming between disparate pieces of information. What if they're planning to use the disaster zones themselves as power sources, tapping into damaged but partially functional infrastructure? Harper's eyes widened. That would be incredibly risky. Disaster zone power grids are notoriously unstable. But it would explain their claims about extended operation without corresponding battery capacity, Mason pointed out. They're assuming they can scavenge power locally, which could endanger recovery workers and survivors if they tap into compromised systems. Harper's voice had taken on a new intensity. That's not just cutting corners, it's potentially dangerous. Mason nodded grimly. It would be nearly impossible to ensure safety with that approach. Too many variables in disaster conditions. Harper moved to her desk, tapping commands into her computer with quick, precise movements. I'm flagging this for our legal team to investigate. If Rothschild is planning to use that approach, the safety implications could be grounds for challenging their bid. As she worked, Mason noticed a framed photograph on her desk that he hadn't seen before: a young boy with a gap-toothed smile sitting in a hospital bed surrounded by books. Michael, he presumed. Harper's brother, whose memory still shaped her decisions years after his death. The revelation gave new context to Harper's determination. This wasn't just about beating her ex-husband in business. It was about honoring a promise to her brother, about creating something that might have saved others like him. The contracts, Harper said suddenly, looking up from her computer. You should review them while I compile this information for legal. They're standard consulting agreements, but I want you to be comfortable with the terms. Mason hesitated. Before I look at those, I need to ask you something. Harper straightened, her expression guarded. Go ahead. If we identify the source of the information leak, what happens next? That depends on the circumstances, Harper replied cautiously. If it's inadvertent, we address security protocols. If it's deliberate, will you pursue legal action? Mason pressed. Harper studied him for a moment. You're concerned about potential fallout affecting Lily. It wasn't a question, but Mason nodded anyway. I've worked hard to create stability for her. Corporate espionage investigations tend to be anything but stable for everyone involved. I understand that concern, Harper said, her voice softening slightly. If it comes to legal action, I would ensure that you and Lily are insulated from any public aspects of the proceedings. Your names would be kept out of filings. Mason considered her words, weighing them against what he had learned about Harper Lancaster over the past week. For all her reputation as the Ice Queen CEO, she had shown genuine care for Lily's well-being. He had to believe that concern was sincere. All right, he said finally. I'll review the contracts. Thank you. Harper's relief was evident, a brief crack in her professional veneer. And Mason, I do appreciate your willingness to continue with the project despite these complications. Before Mason could respond, his phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it, then froze, his expression changing so rapidly that Harper immediately tensed. What is it? She asked. It's Mrs. Chen, Mason said, his voice tight. Lily's not feeling well. Shortness of breath, dizziness. I need to go. Harper was already moving toward the door. I'll drive you to the guest house. No need to interrupt your work. I'm driving you, Harper repeated, her tone brooking no argument. If Lily needs medical attention, my car will get us to St. Mary's faster than anything else on the property. Mason didn't waste time arguing. Every second counted when Lily's heart symptoms flared. They moved through the house at a near-run, Harper grabbing car keys from a hook by the door. The drive to the guest house took less than a minute, Harper piloting the Mercedes SUV along the estate's private roads with the same precision she applied to everything else. Mason was out of the car before it fully stopped racing up the steps to the guest house. Inside, he found Mrs. Chen sitting with Lily on the living room sofa. His daughter's face was pale, her breathing labored. The familiar sight sent ice through Mason's veins. Daddy, Lily managed, attempting a brave smile that broke Mason's heart. My heart's being silly again. Mason knelt before her, taking her pulse with practiced fingers while keeping his expression calm. Her heartbeat was rapid and irregular, her skin clammy to the touch. He recognized the symptoms of cardiac distress that had sent them to emergency rooms 3 times in the past year. How long? He asked Mrs. Chen quietly. About 15 minutes, the older woman replied. It came on suddenly while we were reading. I gave her the emergency medication from the refrigerator, but it hasn't helped yet. Mason nodded, already calculating. The emergency medication should have shown effects by now. Its failure to do so suggested this episode was more serious than the typical flare-ups. We need to get her to St. Mary's, he said, gathering Lily into his arms. Her small body felt frighteningly light, a bird with fragile bones. The car's ready, Harper said from the doorway. Mason hadn't even noticed her arrival. I've called ahead to the cardiac unit. They're expecting us. Mason carried Lily to the waiting SUV, settling her carefully in the back seat. He climbed in beside her, cradling her against his chest as Harper took the driver's seat. Belt in, Harper instructed, her voice calm but urgent. This won't be a leisurely drive. As soon as they were secured, Harper accelerated down the estate's driveway, the powerful vehicle responding instantly to her commands. She drove with focused intensity, taking corners with precision and accelerating on straightaways with no wasted motion. In the back seat, Mason held Lily close, monitoring her pulse and breathing. Just like our practice drills, lily pad, he murmured. Slow, deep breaths. That's my brave girl. Lily tried to comply, but her breaths came in short, painful gasps. It hurts, Daddy, she whispered, fear evident in her voice, despite her efforts to be brave. I know, sweetheart. We're getting help. Just stay with me. Mason kept his voice steady through sheer force of will, though terror clawed at his throat. These episodes had been increasing in frequency and severity over the past year, each one a grim reminder of the fragility of Lily's condition. Through the front windshield, Mason could see Harper handling the vehicle with the same confident competence she brought to everything else. She navigated traffic with single-minded purpose, using the luxury SUV's power to create openings where none seemed to exist. Her focus was absolute, her normally perfect posture now bent slightly forward over the steering wheel, as if physically pulling them toward the hospital through sheer determination. 5 minutes, she announced, catching Mason's eye in the rearview mirror. How is she? Holding steady, Mason replied. Though steady was a generous description, Lily's condition wasn't worsening, but neither was it improving. Each labored breath seemed to require more effort than the last. The 15-minute drive to St. Mary's took barely 8 minutes under Harper's focused piloting. She pulled directly to the emergency entrance where, true to her word, a team was waiting with a gurney. Everything moved with the controlled urgency of well-trained medical professionals. Lily was transferred to the gurney, vital signs assessed, oxygen applied. Mason provided her medical history in the clipped, precise language he had learned through too many similar episodes. Harper stood slightly apart, her presence a steady anchor in the chaos of the moment. As they prepared to move Lily to the cardiac unit for further assessment, a doctor in surgical scrubs approached. "Mr. Carter, I'm Dr. Margaret Chen. Ms. Lancaster contacted me about Lily's case last week." Mason glanced at Harper, who gave a slight nod. This was the specialist she had mentioned, the one with the 6-month waiting list. "I'd like to examine Lily immediately if you'll permit it," Dr. Chen continued. "Her symptoms suggest an arrhythmia that might respond to a procedure I've been developing." Mason hesitated only briefly. "Do whatever you need to do, doctor. Just help her." Dr. Chen nodded, already turning to join the medical team surrounding Lily. "I'll update you as soon as we have more information. The nurses will show you to the waiting area." As Lily was wheeled away, Mason felt a momentary vertigo, as if the floor beneath him had suddenly tilted. The familiar hospital smells, antiseptic, recycled air, underlying illness brought back memories of Rebecca's final days. The same helplessness threatened to overwhelm him. A hand touched his arm, warm and steady. Harper stood beside him, her eyes fixed on his face. "She's going to be all right," she said quietly. "Dr. Chen is the best there is." Mason nodded, unable to speak past the knot in his throat. Together they followed a nurse to the cardiac unit's waiting area, a room designed to project calming reassurance through soft colors and comfortable seating. Mason had spent too many hours in rooms just like it to be fooled by the superficial comfort. They sat side by side in molded plastic chairs. Mason leaned forward, elbows on knees, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles whitened. Harper sat straight, her perfect posture maintained even now, though her fingers worried at the hem of her jacket in an unconscious betrayal of her concern. Minutes stretched into an hour. Mason alternated between rigid stillness and restless pacing. Harper remained seated, occasionally checking her phone, but mainly watching Mason with quiet concern. "You don't have to stay, Mason said finally during one of his pacing circuits. "This could take hours. I'm sure you have more important matters to attend to." Harper looked up, her expression unreadable. "Do you want me to leave?" The question was direct, without artifice. Mason stopped pacing, considering. "No," he admitted, "but I don't want to impose." "You're not imposing," Harper said simply. "I want to be here." Mason studied her face, looking for signs of obligation or professional courtesy. What he saw instead was genuine concern, perhaps even fear. Not the efficient CEO managing a human resources issue, but a woman who cared what happened to his daughter. He sat again, the fight going out of him. "Thank you for everything, getting us here, calling Dr. Chen ahead of time. I'm not sure I could have managed it all." "You would have," Harper said with quiet certainty. "You've been managing it alone for years, but you shouldn't have to." The words hung between them, loaded with implications neither was prepared to address. Mason looked away, fixing his gaze on the bland watercolor paintings adorning the waiting room walls. "Rebecca died in a hospital room, not unlike this one," he said after a long moment. "Same antiseptic smell, same beeping monitors, same feeling of complete helplessness." Harper didn't respond immediately, letting the confession settle between them. When she spoke, her voice was softer than Mason had ever heard it. "Michael died at home. We had hospice care by then. I was holding his hand, reading to him. He just stopped breathing mid-sentence. I kept reading for almost 5 minutes before I realized." Mason turned to her, seeing the memory etched in the tightness around her eyes. "I'm sorry." "It was a long time ago," Harper said, the same words she had used when first telling him about Michael. But this time they lacked conviction. "Some losses never become past tense," Mason observed. "They just become part of who we are." Harper nodded, a barely perceptible movement. "The hardest part was watching my parents afterward. My father buried himself in work. My mother withdrew into a depression she never fully emerged from. They both loved Michael desperately, but they couldn't help each other through losing him." "Is that why you threw yourself into Lancaster logistics after your divorce? Following your father's example?" Harper's laugh held no humor. "Perceptive. Yes, I suppose I did. Work doesn't argue or betray or die. It just demands, and demands are easier to meet than emotional needs. Until they're not, Mason said quietly. Harper met his gaze directly. Until they're not, she agreed. They sat in silence after that, the shared understanding between them deeper than words could express. Two people shaped by loss, finding unexpected recognition in each other's coping mechanisms. The waiting room door opened, admitting Dr. Chen still in surgical scrubs. Mason was on his feet instantly, heart hammering against his ribs. Mr. Carter, Dr. Chen said, her expression serious but not grim. Lily has stabilized. We've corrected the immediate arrhythmia with medication, but I'm concerned about the underlying condition. Mason nodded, bracing himself. Her cardiomyopathy has been progressively worsening over the past year. Yes, I've reviewed her records. The previous treatments have been appropriate, but they're becoming less effective. Dr. Chen hesitated, choosing her words carefully. I believe Lily would benefit from a more aggressive intervention. Specifically, I'd like to consider her for a new type of pacemaker my team has been developing for pediatric patients. A pacemaker, Mason's voice caught. That's typically a last resort for children her age. Traditional pacemakers, yes, Dr. Chen agreed, but our new design is specifically engineered for growing patients. It's minimally invasive and adaptable as she develops. What are the risks? Mason asked, falling back on the engineer's approach to problems: analyze, evaluate, decide. All surgical procedures carry risks, Dr. Chen acknowledged, but in Lily's case, I believe the risks of not intervening are becoming greater. Today's episode was severe, Mr. Carter. Without the prompt treatment she received, the outcome could have been much worse. The implication hung in the air, unspoken but unmistakable. Lily's condition was reaching a critical point. The careful management that had sustained her for years was no longer sufficient. When would this procedure happen? Mason asked, his voice steady despite the fear churning in his stomach. Ideally within the next 2 weeks. We need to run additional tests first, and I'd like to monitor Lily for at least 48 hours before discharging her. Dr. Chen's expression softened slightly. I know this is a lot to process. You don't need to decide immediately. Mason nodded, mind racing through implications, questions, concerns. Can I see her now? Of course, she's sedated but stable. Room 412, just down the hall. Dr. Chen glanced at Harper, who had remained silent during the exchange. Ms. Lancaster, thank you for bringing this case to my attention. Lily is exactly the type of patient our research is designed to help. Harper inclined her head slightly. Thank you for making time to see her, doctor. Your reputation is well-deserved. As Dr. Chen departed, Mason turned to Harper. You set this up before today's episode. How did you know? I didn't, Harper replied. But you mentioned her condition was worsening. I simply made sure the best specialist was available if needed. Mason studied her face, looking for ulterior motives or calculated charity. He found neither, only the practical concern of someone who had watched a loved one's health deteriorate and understood the importance of having the right resources available. Thank you, he said simply. I need to see Lily now. Of course, I'll wait here. Mason paused. You don't have to. This could be hours. I'll wait, Harper repeated, her tone making it clear the matter wasn't open for discussion. Mason nodded, oddly grateful for her stubborn presence. He made his way down the hospital corridor to room 412, steeling himself for what he would find. Lily lay in a hospital bed that seemed too large for her small frame. Monitors beeped with reassuring regularity, displaying vital signs that had stabilized but remained concerning. Her face was pale against the white pillowcase, her blue eyes closed in medicated sleep. Mason approached quietly, taking her small hand in his. Her fingers were cool but pink, with healthy circulation. He sat in the chair beside her bed, maintaining the bedside vigil that had become a familiar part of their life together. Time passed in the measured beeps of the heart monitor. Mason drifted between acute awareness and exhausted detachment, his body slumping in the uncomfortable chair, even as his mind remained hyper-alert to any change in Lily's condition. He wasn't sure how much time had passed when he became aware of someone else in the room. Harper stood in the doorway holding 2 paper cups of coffee. She approached quietly, offering one to Mason. Hospital coffee, she said softly. Universally terrible, but it contains caffeine. Mason accepted the cup with a grateful nod. Thanks. Harper took the chair on the opposite side of Lily's bed, her movements careful to avoid disturbing the sleeping child or the medical equipment surrounding her. For several minutes, they sat in companionable silence, the shared vigil requiring no conversation. "She looks peaceful," Harper observed, finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "The medications help," Mason replied. "When she wakes, the discomfort will return, though hopefully less severe than before." Harper nodded, her gaze fixed on Lily's face. "She has extraordinary courage for someone so young." "She does," Mason agreed, pride momentarily displacing worry. "She's never known any different, which makes it harder in some ways and easier in others. This has been her normal since birth." "Children adapt to their circumstances with remarkable resilience," Harper said. "Michael used to call his hospital stays hotel vacations. He'd rate the food and the television channels like a tiny critic." Mason smiled at the image. "Lily does something similar. She has a collection of hospital bracelets from different facilities. She compares them like a connoisseur, which are most comfortable, which have the brightest colors." Harper's answering smile held both amusement and pain. Finding joy in unlikely places, a valuable skill at any age. "Rebecca taught her that," Mason said softly. "Even in her final days, Rebecca found reasons to smile, moments to treasure. I've tried to continue that lesson." "You've succeeded," Harper assured him. "Anyone who spends 5 minutes with Lily can see her joy in the world despite everything." They lapsed into silence again, the quiet understanding between them deepening. Outside the hospital window, afternoon had given way to evening, the sky darkening to indigo. City lights twinkled, like earthbound stars, life continuing its rhythms beyond the hospital walls. Lily stirred slightly, her eyelids fluttering. Mason leaned forward, instantly alert. "Lily Pad, can you hear me?" Her eyes opened slowly, confusion giving way to recognition. "Daddy?" Her voice was hoarse, barely audible. "I'm here, sweetheart. You're in the hospital, but you're doing better now." Mason kept his tone deliberately light, hiding his concern behind practiced reassurance. Lily's gaze shifted, finding Harper on her other side. "Miss Harper came too." "Of course I did," Harper replied, her usual crisp delivery softened to a gentle murmur. "Someone needed to make sure the doctors took extra good care of you." A ghost of a smile touched Lily's pale lips. "Did you use your boss voice on them?" Harper laughed softly. "Only a little. They seemed quite competent without my supervision." Lily's attention span was brief, her eyelids already growing heavy again. "Tired," she murmured. "Heart still feels funny." "That's the medicine Lily Pad," Mason explained. "It's helping your heart find its rhythm again. Just rest now. I'll be right here when you wake up." "Promise." The word was slurred with approaching sleep. "Promise," Mason confirmed, squeezing her hand gently. Lily's eyes closed, her breathing evening out as she slipped back into sleep. Mason maintained his hold on her hand, the physical connection a reassurance to them both. "She's stronger than she looks," Harper observed quietly. "She has to be," Mason replied. "Her whole life has been an exercise in overcoming limitations." Harper nodded, her expression thoughtful. "The pacemaker Dr. Chen mentioned, and would your insurance cover it?" Mason tensed slightly. Here it was, the uncomfortable discussion of finances that inevitably accompanied medical crises in America. "Partially, it's experimental, so coverage would be limited. I've been saving for emergencies, but a procedure like this..." He trailed off, unwilling to admit the full extent of the financial challenge. His savings would cover perhaps a third of the cost. The rest would require loans, payment plans, possibly even bankruptcy. "Lancaster Logistics has a charitable foundation," Harper said carefully, watching his face. "It focuses on pediatric medical innovations, the kind of research Dr. Chen is conducting." Mason straightened, immediately understanding her implication. "Harper." "It wouldn't be charity," she interrupted, anticipating his objection. "The foundation funds promising medical research in exchange for data that helps improve our disaster response planning. Dr. Chen's pacemaker technology has applications for emergency medicine in disaster zones. Supporting her research by funding a procedure for Lily would be entirely within the foundation's mission." Mason wanted to refuse. Pride and independence had been his companions since Rebecca's death, guiding principles in a world that had taken so much from him. Accepting financial help, even indirectly, felt like surrendering something essential about himself. But as he looked at Lily's sleeping face, Mason recognized the selfishness in that pride. His daughter's health mattered more than his ego. If Harper's foundation could help secure the treatment Lily needed, refusing would be putting his feelings above his daughter's well-being. "I'd need to understand exactly what's involved," he said finally. "The foundation's requirements, the obligations it would create." Relief flickered across Harper's face. "Of course, I'll have the foundation director contact you with full details, but I can assure you the only requirement would be allowing anonymized medical data to be included in research statistics. No public appearances, no promotional materials." Mason nodded, still uncomfortable but resolute. "Thank you. I'll consider it seriously." "That's all I ask." Harper glanced at her watch. "It's getting late. You should try to rest. There's a reclining chair in the corner that converts to a passable bed. Hospital accommodations leave much to be desired, but it's better than nothing." "You don't need to stay," Mason said, though without much conviction. Harper's presence had become a strange comfort in the sterile hospital environment. "I'll go home to change and handle some essential business," Harper replied. "But I'll return in the morning. You shouldn't have to manage this alone." The simple statement carried a weight that settled in Mason's chest, warm and unexpected. He had been managing alone for so long that the idea of sharing the burden even temporarily felt almost foreign. "Thank you," he said again, the words inadequate for the gratitude he felt. Harper stood smoothing her rumpled suit with an unconscious gesture. Despite the day's chaos, she still projected an aura of composed competence. Though Mason had begun to recognize the subtle signs of strain beneath the surface, the tightness around her eyes, the slight tension in her shoulders. "Try to rest," she instructed. "Lily will need you at full strength when she wakes." Mason nodded, knowing she was right, but doubting his ability to sleep while Lily lay connected to monitors and medication drips. As Harper moved toward the door, he spoke again. "Harper, this means more than I can say." She paused, turning back to meet his gaze. For a moment, her professional mask slipped entirely, revealing unexpected vulnerability beneath. "You would do the same," she said simply. "In fact, you already have." Before Mason could ask what she meant, Harper was gone, the soft click of the closing door the only evidence of her departure. Mason settled deeper into the chair beside Lily's bed, his body aching with fatigue but his mind still racing. What had Harper meant by her parting words? When had he helped her in any meaningful way? Their relationship had been one-sided from the beginning. Harper offering opportunities, resources, support, while Mason contributed only his technical knowledge to her project. Unless the help she valued wasn't material at all. Perhaps by allowing her into their lives, by sharing Lily's bright spirit and his own straightforward approach to problems, he had given Harper something she lacked in her carefully controlled world: genuine human connection without agenda or calculation. The thought was both humbling and empowering. For years, Mason had defined himself by what he could provide materially for Lily's shelter, food, medical care. The idea that his worth might also lie in less tangible qualities was a perspective shift he wasn't prepared to fully process in his exhausted state. Outside the hospital window, night had fully claimed the sky. City lights sparkled against the darkness, each one representing lives being lived in apartments and houses across the urban landscape. How many of those lights illuminated scenes of quiet desperation like his own? How many parents sat beside hospital beds? How many people faced financial ruin for the sake of a loved one's health? Mason's thoughts drifted to Harper's emergency response system. If successful, it would deliver life-saving supplies to disaster zones more efficiently than current methods. But the people receiving those supplies would still face the aftermath, rebuilding homes, replacing lost possessions, managing trauma. One system, however well-designed, couldn't address all aspects of human suffering. These abstract concerns blurred as exhaustion claimed him. Mason's head drooped, his body surrendering to sleep, even as his hand maintained its gentle grip on Lily's. His last conscious thought was a prayer to whatever force might be listening, not for himself, but for the small girl whose heartbeat measured time on the monitor beside her bed. Morning arrived with the institutional rhythm of hospital life: nurses changing shifts, breakfast carts rattling down hallways, the mechanical hum of equipment providing a constant background to human activity. Mason woke with a stiff neck and the momentary disorientation of unfamiliar surroundings. Lily was still sleeping, her vital signs stable on the monitors. Mason stretched carefully, easing the kinks from muscles protesting a night spent in an uncomfortable chair. He used the small attached bathroom to wash his face and rinse his mouth, the cold water bringing alertness, if not actual refreshment. When he emerged, the nurse was checking Lily's medications and recording vitals. She nodded to Mason with the brisk efficiency of someone with too many patients in too little time. Dr. Chen will be by in about an hour, she informed him. Your daughter had a good night. Vitals are improving steadily. Thank you, Mason replied, relief washing through him. He moved to the window, looking out at the morning cityscape. The hospital was on a hill, providing a panoramic view of urban sprawl, giving way to suburbs, then to the more rural areas where Harper's estate was located. Somewhere out there, his temporary home waited, though it felt distant and unreal compared to the immediate reality of the hospital room. A soft knock at the door preceded Harper's arrival. She entered quietly, transformed from the previous day's business attire into casual elegance, dark jeans, a simple blouse, hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She carried 2 paper bags and a tray with coffee cups. Breakfast, she explained, setting her burdens on the small side table. I took the liberty of assuming you haven't eaten. Hospital food leaves much to be desired, especially for those in the waiting rooms. The gesture was so unexpectedly thoughtful that Mason found himself momentarily speechless. Thank you, he managed finally. I didn't realize how hungry I was until just now. Harper distributed the food, freshly baked bagels, cream cheese, fruit, with the same efficient precision she brought to business operations. She handed Mason a coffee cup marked with his preference, black 2 hours, another small detail that revealed her capacity for observation. How was your night? She asked, settling into the chair opposite Lily's bed. Better than expected, Mason replied, gratitude for the food making him almost lightheaded. Lily slept through. The nurse says her vitals are improving. Harper nodded, visible relief softening her features. Excellent news. Dr. Chen is optimistic about her approach for Lily's case. I spoke with her briefly this morning. Mason paused mid-bite. You've already been here today. I arrived early to handle some foundation business. Harper explained, her tone making it clear this was routine rather than exceptional. The director will be contacting you later today about the funding arrangements for Lily's procedure. The reminder of his financial predicament dampened Mason's appetite, but he forced himself to continue eating. His body needed fuel regardless of his discomfort with accepting help. I appreciate that, he said carefully, but I want to be clear, this can't affect our professional relationship. The consulting work needs to remain separate from any assistance with Lily's medical care. Harper's eyebrow raised slightly. Of course, the foundation operates independently from Lancaster Logistics' main business operations. There's no conflict. Mason nodded, not entirely convinced but unwilling to refuse help that Lily desperately needed. The conversation shifted to lighter topics, hospital observations, stories from Mason's previous experiences with medical facilities, Harper's surprisingly extensive knowledge of pediatric cardiac research. They were midway through breakfast when Lily stirred, her eyes opening with greater alertness than the previous evening. She blinked, taking in her surroundings with the resigned familiarity of a child who had spent too much time in hospital rooms. Morning, Daddy, she murmured, her voice stronger, though still raspy. Miss Harper, too. Good morning, Lily Pad, Mason replied, moving immediately to her side. How are you feeling? Lily considered the question with serious contemplation. My heart's not racing anymore. Still tired, though, and hungry. Hungry is a good sign, Harper observed, smiling at the child. Would you like some fruit? The nurse might want to check before you have anything more substantial. Lily nodded, eyeing the food with interest. Mason helped her sit up slightly, adjusting pillows to support her burn. Harper prepared a small plate of sliced strawberries and apple, placing it within easy reach. Thank you for fixing my heart again, Lily said to Harper as she reached for a strawberry. Harper looked startled. I didn't fix anything, Lily. The doctors did that. But you brought us here, Lily pointed out with the irrefutable logic of childhood. And Daddy says you got the special doctor who knows about hearts like mine. Mason watched the exchange with interest, noting the fleeting vulnerability that crossed Harper's face before she composed herself. I just made a phone call, Harper said modestly. Your daddy did the hard work of taking care of you all these years. Lily nodded sagely. Daddy's good at fixing things. So are you. You fixed his sad eyes. Mason felt heat rise in his face. Lily, it's true, his daughter insisted. You smile more since we came to Ms. Harper's house. Real smiles, not the pretend ones. The observation delivered with a child's unfiltered honesty created a moment of awkward silence. Harper seemed as discomfited as Mason, her usual composure briefly abandoned. Well, she said finally, I think we've all helped each other in different ways. Lily accepted this diplomatic response, turning her attention to the fruit with the single-minded focus of a hungry child. Mason caught Harper's eye over Lily's head, an unspoken acknowledgement passing between them. Lily's perception was uncomfortably accurate, though neither adult was prepared to examine its implications fully. The moment was interrupted by Dr. Chen's arrival. The specialist entered with brisk efficiency, tablet in hand, already reviewing Lily's overnight data. Good morning, Lily, she greeted her patient. I hear you're feeling better today. My heart's behaving, Lily confirmed, but it still feels funny sometimes. Dr. Chen nodded, approaching the bed. May I listen to it? I promise my stethoscope isn't too cold. Lily giggled. Doctors always say that, but it's never true. The examination proceeded with Dr. Chen's gentle efficiency. She listened to Lily's heart from multiple angles, checked reflexes, examined fingernails, and skin tone, all while maintaining a conversation that put the child at ease. Mason watched with the critical eye of a parent who had seen dozens of doctors interact with his daughter, some with clinical detachment, others with patronizing sweetness. Dr. Chen struck the perfect balance, treating Lily as a person while never forgetting she was a child. Well, Miss Lily, Dr. Chen concluded, your heart is definitely improving, but it's still not as strong as I'd like. Remember how we talked about special heart helpers yesterday? Lily nodded, like a tiny computer for my heart. Exactly. Dr. Chen smiled. I think you would benefit from one of those helpers. It would make your heart beat more regularly and help you feel better day to day. Would it hurt? Lily asked the question, revealing her greatest fear. The procedure to put it in would be uncomfortable, Dr. Chen acknowledged honestly, but we have very good medicines to help with that. And afterward, you wouldn't feel the device at all. It would just quietly help your heart do its job. Lily considered this with serious contemplation. Would I be able to run and play like other kids? The question pierced Mason's heart. Lily had always accepted her limitations with remarkable grace, but moments like this revealed her awareness of the differences between her life and those of her peers. Run immediately, Dr. Chen cautioned them. But over time, yes, you would likely have much more energy for activities. The pacemaker helps your heart work more efficiently, so your body gets the oxygen it needs even during exercise. Lily's face brightened with hope. I could play tag at recess. Eventually, Chen confirmed, we'd start slowly, but that would be the goal. Lily turned to Mason, her blue eyes wide with plea. Can I have the heart helper, Daddy, please? Mason swallowed hard emotion, threatening to overwhelm his composure. If Dr. Chen thinks it's the best option, then yes, Lily Pad. We'll do whatever helps you feel better. Relief and gratitude flooded Lily's expression. She turned back to Dr. Chen. When can I get it? We need to run a few more tests first, the doctor explained. But if all goes well, we could schedule the procedure for early next week. You'll stay in the hospital for a few days afterward so we can make sure everything is working properly. Lily nodded, accepting this timeline with the resignation of a child accustomed to medical procedures. Will I have a scar? A small one, Dr. Chen acknowledged. Just about an inch long near your collarbone. It will fade over time. That's okay, Lily decided. Daddy says scars are just proof that you're stronger than whatever tried to hurt you. Mason felt Harper's gaze on him, a mix of surprise and something warmer, more appreciative. He kept his focus on Lily, not trusting himself to meet Harper's eyes in that moment of emotional vulnerability. Dr. Chen completed her consultation, discussing technical details and scheduling with Mason, while Harper kept Lily entertained with a game on her tablet. The normalcy of the scene belied its extraordinariness, the billionaire CEO sitting cross-legged on a hospital chair, patiently explaining game strategies to a 7-year-old with a heart condition. When Dr. Chen departed, promising to return later with test results, a nurse arrived to take Lily for an echocardiogram. Mason helped transfer his daughter to a wheelchair, kissed her forehead, and watched as she was wheeled away for yet another in the endless series of tests that had defined her young life. Left alone with Harper, Mason felt a strange mix of gratitude and discomfort. The professional boundaries between them had blurred beyond recognition in the past 24 hours. Harper had seen him at his most vulnerable, afraid for his daughter, uncertain about the future, dependent on others for help he couldn't provide himself. "Thank you," he said, finally breaking the silence between them, "for everything the Foundation supports staying here by student. It's far beyond what I could have expected." Harper shook her head slightly. "Don't thank me yet. The Foundation paperwork still needs to be processed, and hospital bureaucracy moves at its own pace. There will be challenges ahead." "Nevertheless," Mason insisted, "you've done more than anyone else has since Rebecca died. Most people offer sympathy and then disappear when the reality of chronic illness becomes apparent." Harper's expression softened. "People fear what they don't understand. Serious illness reminds them of their own mortality, their own vulnerability. It's easier to turn away than to witness suffering you can't fix." "Is that what you're doing?" "Trying to fix our suffering." The question wasn't accusatory but genuinely curious. Harper considered it with the seriousness it deserved. "Perhaps partly," she admitted. "Michael's death left me with a sense of helplessness. I've never fully escaped. Watching my parents disintegrate afterward only compounded it. When I see you and Lily, your closeness, your resilience, despite everything, I want to support that. Not just for your sakes, but because it represents something I lost and never found again." The honesty of her response caught Mason off guard. He had expected a polite deflection or a businesslike explanation about Foundation objectives. Instead, Harper had revealed a personal truth that made her support more meaningful and paradoxically easier to accept. "Lily was right, you know," he said after a moment. "About the smiles, being around you and working on the project, it's awakened something I thought I'd left behind permanently. A sense of purpose beyond daily survival." Harper met his gaze directly. "That works both ways. Your perspective has been invaluable to the project, but more than that." She hesitated, seemingly searching for words, an unusual occurrence for someone typically so articulate. "You and Lily have reminded me that success isn't measured solely in profit margins and market share." Before either could speak again, Mason's phone chimed with a message. He checked it, then frowned. "Something wrong?" Harper asked, immediately alert. "Jason from the engineering team," Mason explained. "He says they have hit a critical issue with the guidance system simulation. The power supply modifications we discussed yesterday are creating unexpected interference with the navigation backup." Harper's expression shifted subtly, the personal vulnerability replaced by professional focus. "Can it wait until tomorrow? Lily should be your priority right now." Mason appreciated the sentiment, but shook his head. "The team has a prototype demonstration scheduled for Monday. If the interference issue isn't resolved, they'll have to postpone, which would give Rothschild's team a potential advantage in the contract competition." Understanding dawned in Harper's eyes. "You want to help them solve it?" "I think I can," Mason admitted. "Based on Jason's description, it sounds like a shielding problem I encountered in aircraft systems. But I'd need access to the simulation software, which is only on the secure servers at your estate." Harper considered for a moment, then reached a decision. "Lily will be in tests for at least 2 hours, correct?" Mason nodded. "The echocardiogram is just the first in a series. Dr. Chen was very thorough in her testing orders." "And then I propose a compromise," Harper said. "We return to the estate, you work with the team to address the critical issue, and we come back here before Lily returns from her tests. She need never know we were gone." The suggestion made practical sense, yet Mason hesitated. "What if something happens while we're away?" "The hospital has your contact information," Harper pointed out, "and it would be a 30-minute drive at most. Dr. Chen herself said Lily is stable now." Mason weighed the options. The guidance system project was important not just professionally, but for its potential to save lives in disaster situations. A few hours of focused work might solve a problem that would otherwise delay crucial development. "All right," he agreed finally. "But we need to be back before Lily returns from testing. I promised I'd be here when she got back." "Absolutely," Harper confirmed. "I'll have the car brought around." The drive back to the estate was swift and purposeful, Harper handling the Mercedes with the same confident precision she brought to everything else. Mason used the time to exchange messages with Jason, getting more details about the interference issue and mentally mapping out potential solutions. At the estate, they went directly to the engineering lab, where the team had gathered around the simulation monitors displaying error messages that meant little to the untrained eye, but spoke volumes to Mason's experienced perspective. The power fluctuations from the wind turbine integration are creating electromagnetic interference with the backup navigation system, Jason explained, pointing to data streams on the screen. We've tried conventional shielding, but it's not sufficient in the simulated hurricane conditions. Mason studied the data mine, already working through potential solutions. The problem isn't the shielding itself, he said finally. It's the grounding. In aircraft systems, we encountered similar issues with lightning strikes creating electromagnetic pulses. The solution was to create multiple redundant grounding paths that could handle massive power surges without overloading. He moved to a whiteboard sketching a modified system architecture with practiced efficiency. The team gathered around watching as complex concepts took visual form under Mason's hand. We'd need to reconfigure the physical layout, Howard noted, studying the diagram. The current prototype doesn't have space for these additional pathways. That's because you're thinking three-dimensionally, Mason replied, adding to his sketch. We can create a mesh grounding system that follows the existing structural framework, adding minimal weight in bulk while providing comprehensive protection. The solution was elegant in its simplicity, not requiring new components so much as a reconceptualization of how existing elements related to one another. As Mason explained the approach, he felt the familiar satisfaction of solving a complex problem, of seeing connections that others had missed. Harper watched from the doorway, not interrupting, but observing with quiet appreciation. This was Mason in his element, not just repairing what others had built, but reimagining possibilities within existing constraints. His hands moved with confidence, his explanations clear and accessible despite the technical complexity. The team quickly grasped the concept, Jason already modifying the simulation parameters to test Mason's approach. Within an hour, they had a working model that showed promising results under even the most extreme simulated conditions. This could work, Jason admitted, a note of genuine respect in his voice. It's elegant and implementable within our time frame. And it addresses the power scavenging approach that Rothschild's team is likely using. Mason added, referencing their previous discussion about the competitor's questionable power strategy. Our system will be more reliable and safer in actual disaster conditions. As the team began implementing the changes to the physical prototype, Harper approached Mason. That was impressive, she said quietly. You've potentially saved weeks of development time. Mason shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. It's just pattern recognition. I've seen similar problems before in different contexts. That's precisely what makes your perspective valuable, Harper insisted. The team is brilliant but limited by their specific experience. You bring a broader view. Before Mason could respond, his phone buzzed with a message. He checked it, relief washing over his face. Chen says Lily's tests are going well, but they'll take longer than expected. We have another hour before we need to head back. Harper nodded. Perfect. That gives us time to address something else. She hesitated, then continued. I received some concerning information this morning about the potential information leak to Rothschild. Mason tensed immediately. What kind of information? Our IT security team detected unusual access patterns in our project database. Harper explained, keeping her voice low, despite the background noise of the engineering team's activities. Someone has been reviewing the guidance system specifications during odd hours from remote locations. Do you know who? Harper's expression tightened. Not definitively, but the access credentials belong to Howard. Mason glanced across the room at the older engineer, who was currently working with Jason on the prototype modifications. Are you sure? He seems genuinely invested in the project's success. The credentials are his, Harper replied. Whether he's knowingly involved or his access has been compromised, we need to determine quickly. What's your plan? Harper's eyes held a calculating look that reminded Mason of their first meeting, the shrewd businesswoman assessing situations and people with clinical detachment. I'm going to provide some misleading information through secure channels. If Rothschild's team suddenly incorporates that exact approach into their design, we'll have confirmation of the leak. And then we address the situation accordingly. Harper's tone made it clear that addressing would be thorough and likely unpleasant for those involved. Mason considered this strategy, engineer's mind automatically searching for failure points. What if they recognize the misinformation for what it is? Or worse, what if it's incorporated into our actual design by mistake? Harper smiled slightly, appreciating his thoroughness. The misinformation will relate to an auxiliary system that won't affect core functionality, and it will be plausible enough that detecting it as deliberate would require deep technical expertise, which Daniel lacks. It was a calculated risk, but one with limited downside. Mason nodded his agreement. Just make sure the team knows which information is accurate and which is bait. Of course, I don't compromise my own projects even temporarily. Harper checked her watch. We should head back to the hospital soon. Dr. Chen mentioned she wanted to discuss the pacemaker procedure in more detail this afternoon. The reminder of Lily's condition sobered Mason immediately, the brief excitement of solving engineering problems giving way to the more pressing reality of his daughter's health. He nodded, already gathering his things. The team can implement the grounding solution without me now. The concept is straightforward enough. They bid farewell to the engineering team, who were now fully engaged in modifying the prototype with renewed energy and direction. As they walked to the car, Mason found himself thinking about the contrast between the two worlds he was currently straddling, the abstract technical challenges of the guidance system and the deeply personal struggle of Lily's heart condition. You move between these contexts very naturally, Harper observed, seeming to read his thoughts. The engineering problem-solving and the personal caregiving. Most people excel at one or the other, rarely both. Mason considered this as they settled into the Mercedes. I don't see them as separate, he said finally. They're just different scales of the same basic human drive to protect what matters, to make things work better than they did before. Harper started the car, her expression thoughtful. That's a remarkably integrated perspective. Most people compartmentalize their professional and personal lives. That luxury disappeared when Rebecca died, Mason replied. Everything became personal then. Even work was just a means to care for Lily. They drove in companionable silence for several minutes, the countryside giving way to suburbs, then to the denser urban landscape surrounding the hospital. Mason found himself thinking about the parallels between Harper's emergency response system and his own journey with Lily, both centered around delivering critical support when standard systems failed. Your project, he said suddenly, the emergency response system. It's not just about honoring Michael's memory, is it? It's about creating the help you wish had been available for him. Harper's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel, the only indication that his observation had struck a nerve. What makes you say that? Because it's what I would do, Mason replied simply. If I had your resources, I'd build systems to prevent other fathers from experiencing what I've gone through with Lily. Harper was silent for so long that Mason thought she might not respond at all. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter than he had ever heard it. The doctors said there was nothing they could do for Michael. The treatments existed, but they couldn't get them to him in time. Supply chain limitations, they called it. As if my brother's life was just another logistics problem. Her voice hardened slightly. I decided then that if logistics was the obstacle, I would master logistics. No other family should face that particular helplessness. The confession revealed more about Harper Lancaster than all their previous conversations combined. Her drive, her focus on efficiency, her determination to control every variable, all stemmed from that foundational moment of powerlessness. You're building more than an emergency response system, Mason observed. You're building redemption. Harper's gaze remained fixed on the road ahead, but a muscle twitched in her jaw. Perhaps, though redemption implies culpability, and logically, I know Michael's death wasn't my fault. Logic has little to do with how we process loss, Mason said gently. I still find myself thinking of what I could have done differently with Rebecca, even though her condition was medically beyond anyone's control. Harper nodded, a barely perceptible movement. The human mind prefers agency to randomness. Better to believe we failed than to accept we were powerless. They arrived at the hospital parking garage, the conversation pausing as Harper maneuvered the Mercedes into a space. As they walked toward the elevator, Mason found himself studying Harper with new understanding. The Ice Queen CEO, the ruthless businesswoman, these were roles she had constructed to pursue a deeply personal mission disguised as corporate expansion. For what it's worth, he said as they waited for the elevator. I think your emergency response system would make Michael proud, not because of its technical sophistication, but because it represents your refusal to let his death be meaningless. Harper's composure wavered for just a moment, something raw and vulnerable flashing across her face before she regained control. Thank you, she said simply. That matters to me. The elevator arrived, saving them from the emotional weight of the moment. They rode in silence to Lily's floor, each processing the unexpected depth of their conversation. Mason found himself wondering if anyone else had ever seen this side of Harper Lancaster, the wounded sister beneath the corporate armor. Lily was back in her room looking tired but alert, her face brightening as they entered. "Daddy, Ms. Harper, did you know they can take pictures of my heart while it's beating? I got to watch on the screen." Mason moved immediately to her side, kissing her forehead. "That's amazing, Lilypad. Was it as strong and beautiful as I always told you?" Lily nodded earnestly. "Dr. Chen said it's a very special heart. It works extra hard." "Just like its owner," Harper commented, taking the chair on the opposite side of the bed, "always putting in extra effort." The afternoon passed in the strangely suspended time of hospital stays, periods of inactivity, punctuated by visits from medical staff, meals delivered on trays, medications administered on precise schedules. Harper remained with them, handling occasional business calls from the hallway, but otherwise fully present in a way that surprised Mason. Dr. Chen returned in the late afternoon with detailed test results and a more specific plan for Lily's pacemaker procedure. She brought images and models explaining the process in terms that Lily could understand without talking down to her. "We'll make a small pocket under your skin right here," Dr. Chen explained, pointing to a spot near Lily's collarbone. "The pacemaker itself is about this size." She held up a small disc roughly the diameter of a $half but thinner. "Then we'll place tiny wires that go to your heart to help it keep the right rhythm." Lily studied the model with serious attention. "Will I be able to feel it under my skin?" "At first you'll be aware of it," Dr. Chen acknowledged, "but most patients soon forget it's there. And this model is specially designed for growing children. It can be adjusted without requiring additional surgeries as you get bigger." The technical details that followed were primarily for Mason's benefit: success rates, potential complications, recovery timelines. Throughout the discussion, Harper asked occasional questions that revealed her surprisingly extensive knowledge of cardiac care, clarifying points that Mason hadn't thought to address. When Dr. Chen departed, promising to schedule the procedure for the following Tuesday, Lily turned to Harper with curious eyes. "How do you know so much about hearts, Ms. Harper?" A shadow crossed Harper's face briefly. "My little brother had a heart condition too when I was younger." "Did he get better?" Lily asked innocently. Mason tensed, but Harper answered with gentle honesty. "No, sweetheart. This was a long time ago, before they had the special helpers like the one Dr. Chen wants to give you. The doctors tried very hard, but his heart was too tired to keep working." Lily absorbed this with the solemn contemplation children sometimes bring to profound subjects. "That's why you're making the special delivery machines, isn't it? To help people like your brother." Harper looked startled. "How did you know about that project?" "I heard you and Daddy talking about it," Lily explained, "about helping people when storms break everything. Daddy said it was important." She carefully sounded out the word. "Your daddy is right," Harper confirmed. "It is important." "Because you want to fix things," Lily stated with absolute certainty. "Just like Daddy does." The simple observation created a moment of connection between the adults, a recognition of the underlying similarity that Lily had perceived with a child's unfiltered clarity. Both Harper and Mason were in their different ways driven by the need to repair what was broken, to impose order on chaos, to protect against future harm. The evening brought a new development. As Mason was helping Lily with her dinner, a hospital administrator arrived with foundation paperwork for the pacemaker procedure. The woman, professionally dressed and carrying a tablet, addressed Mason directly. "Mr. Carter, I'm Amanda Winters from hospital administration. I understand the Lancaster Foundation will be covering Miss Carter's procedure and related care." Her tone was matter-of-fact, as if multi-million-dollar charitable interventions were routine occurrences. Perhaps in this hospital they were. Mason nodded, uncomfortable but resigned to the necessity. "That's my understanding, yes." "Excellent. I just need your signature on these authorization forms. Everything has been pre-approved. This is merely a formality to allow us to proceed with scheduling." As Mason signed the documents, he was acutely aware of Harper watching from across the room, her expression carefully neutral. The administrator tapped a few commands on her tablet, then nodded with satisfaction. "All set. Dr. Chen's office will contact you with the final schedule, but we've tentatively booked the procedure for Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. Miss Carter will need to be admitted the evening before for preparation." After the administrator left, Mason turned to Harper. That was efficient. The foundation board met this morning before I came to the hospital, Harper explained. They voted unanimously to fund Dr. Chen's pediatric pacemaker research program with Lily as the initial case study. The arrangement benefits everyone. Dr. Chen gets research funding, the hospital receives positive publicity for pioneering treatment, and Lily gets the care she needs. The clinical description couldn't quite mask the personal involvement behind the arrangement. Mason knew that Harper must have marshaled significant resources and influence to make everything happen so quickly and smoothly. Thank you, he said simply, the words inadequate for his gratitude. Harper shrugged, slightly uncomfortable with acknowledgement. It's what the foundation was established to do. Michael would have wanted his trust fund used this way. Before Mason could respond, his phone rang. Jason from the engineering team. He excused himself to take the call in the hallway, leaving Harper to help Lily finish her dinner. We've implemented your grounding mesh solution, Jason reported, excitement evident in his voice. Initial testing shows complete elimination of the interference issues even under maximum stress simulation. That's great news, Mason replied, genuinely pleased. How's the prototype coming? We'll have it ready for the demonstration on Monday, Jason confirmed. Howard thinks we should add your name to the patent application for the guidance system. Your contribution was substantive. The offer caught Mason by surprise. That's not necessary. I was just helping solve a problem. It's not about necessity, Jason countered. It's about proper attribution. You transformed our approach. Harper agrees she's already instructed legal to add you to the filing. Mason wasn't sure how to feel about this development. On one hand, professional recognition for his work was gratifying after years of anonymity as a mechanic. On the other hand, patents meant public documentation, potential visibility that might complicate the quiet life he had built for Lily. Let me think about it, he said finally. Right now, my focus is on Lily's procedure next week. Of course, Jason agreed. Family first. Just know the option is there. When Mason returned to the room, he found Harper and Lily engaged in an impromptu drawing session, using the back of a hospital menu and a set of colored pencils that Harper had somehow procured. Lily was sketching what appeared to be a fantastical flying machine, while Harper added technical details that gave the childish drawing unexpected sophistication. It's a heart delivery plane, Lily explained as Mason approached, for taking heart helpers to kids who need them. The concept, so innocent yet so aligned with both adults' deeper motivations, created a lump in Mason's throat. That's a wonderful idea, Lilypad. Ms. Harper says we need to add landing gear for rough places, Lily continued seriously, and special boxes to keep the heart helpers safe. Very practical considerations. Mason agreed, exchanging a glance with Harper over Lily's head. The moment of connection was brief but profound, an acknowledgement of how completely this child had intuited their shared purpose. As evening deepened into night, Lily grew tired, the day's tests and activities taking their toll on her limited energy reserves. Mason helped her prepare for sleep, the familiar bedtime routine adapted to the hospital environment, teeth brushing in the small bathroom, medication scheduled, precisely favorite stuffed rabbit positioned just so beside her pillow. Will you stay tonight, Daddy? Lily asked, her voice already heavy with approaching sleep. Of course, Mason assured her. I'll be right here in that chair when you wake up. What about Ms. Harper? Lily's eyes shifted to where Harper stood near the door, clearly preparing to depart. Harper hesitated, caught off guard by the direct question. I should go home tonight, Lily. Your daddy will take good care of you. But who will take care of Daddy? Lily persisted, logic impeccable in its childish directness. He gets sad when he's alone in hospitals. Mason felt heat rise in his face. Lily, Ms. Harper has important work to do. She can't spend all her time here with us. Actually, Harper interjected, surprising both of them, I could stay for a while longer, at least until you fall asleep, Lily. The simple offer seemed to satisfy Lily, who nodded and snuggled deeper into her blankets. Tell me a story about the heart delivery planes. Harper looked momentarily panicked at this request, but recovered quickly. Once upon a time, she began, her voice softening in a way Mason had never heard before. There was a very special airplane that could fly through the worst storms without ever getting lost. The improvised story unfolded with surprising imagination, a tale of brave pilots and engineers who worked together to bring medical supplies to children in remote locations. Mason listened with quiet amazement as Harper Lancaster, the Ice Queen CEO, wove a narrative that combined technical accuracy with genuine heart, creating a world where problems had solutions and help always arrived in time. Lily's eyes grew heavier as the story progressed, finally closing completely as Harper described the plane's triumphant return home after completing its mission. For several moments after she finished, Harper remained beside the bed watching Lily's peaceful sleep with an expression Mason couldn't quite decipher, something between longing and resolution. "That was quite a story," Mason said quietly as they moved away from the bed to avoid disturbing Lily. "I didn't know you had such imagination." Harper smiled slightly. "I used to make up stories for Michael during in-hospital stays. It was the one thing I could do that the doctors and machines couldn't." The admission revealed yet another layer to this complex woman, the loving sister beneath the businesswoman, the storyteller beneath the strategist. Mason found himself increasingly fascinated by these glimpses of Harper's true self, the person she might have become if grief and betrayal hadn't driven her to build such formidable walls. "You should go home and get some real rest," Mason suggested. "Tomorrow's Sunday, surely even Lancaster Logistics takes occasional weekends." Harper's smile turned wry. "Global shipping never sleeps. But yes, I should probably review some reports before Monday's demonstration." She gathered her things, movements efficient as always. "You'll call if anything changes with Lily." "Of course," Mason promised. "Though Dr. Chen seems confident she's stable now." Harper nodded, seemingly reluctant to leave, despite her stated intention. She paused at the door, turning back to look at Lily's sleeping form. "She really is extraordinary, your daughter. So perceptive, so resilient." "She is," Mason agreed, pride warming his voice. "Sometimes I think she's raising me more than I'm raising her." "Children often understand emotional truths that adults complicate," Harper observed. "Lily sees connections that most people miss. Like the connection between us," Mason thought but didn't say. The unspoken thought hung in the air between them, acknowledged yet carefully unexamined. "Good night, Mason," Harper said finally. "Try to get some rest yourself." "Good night, Harper, and thank you again for everything." After she left, Mason settled into the reclining chair that would serve as his bed for another night. Despite its institutional discomfort, he found himself more at peace than he had expected. Lily was receiving the best possible care. The financial burden of her treatment had been lifted. And somehow in the midst of crisis, he had found unexpected connection with a woman he would once have dismissed as belonging to an inaccessible world. The days that followed developed a rhythm of their own. Lily remained in the hospital for observation and preparation, her condition stable but still requiring careful monitoring. Mason divided his time between her bedside and the estate, where he continued working with the engineering team to refine the guidance system for Monday's demonstration. Harper moved between these worlds with apparent effortlessness, bringing breakfast to the hospital each morning, handling business operations throughout the day, returning in the evenings with dinner and new books or games for Lily. Her presence became so integrated into their routine that Mason found himself watching for her arrival, the day somehow incomplete until she appeared. Monday brought the guidance system demonstration for government procurement officials. Mason attended at Harper's insistence, presenting the technical aspects of the redundant navigation system with a clarity that impressed even the most skeptical evaluators. The prototype performed flawlessly in the simulated disaster conditions, maintaining reliable communication and guidance, even when primary systems were deliberately disabled. "Remarkable resilience," commented the lead evaluator, a retired military officer with extensive emergency management experience. "Most systems we've reviewed become useless at exactly the moment they're most needed. Yours seems to thrive under adverse conditions." "That's by design," Mason explained. "We've built multiple redundancies that operate on different principles. If one system fails, others compensate without human intervention." The evaluation team departed visibly impressed, though protocol prevented them from indicating their procurement decision. Harper, however, was quietly confident as they returned to her office after the demonstration. "They recognized the superior engineering," she said, pouring coffee for both of them. "Daniel may have political connections, but even his influence can't overcome the technical advantages of our system." Mason accepted the coffee gratefully. The presentation had been more draining than he'd anticipated, bringing back memories of his aerospace engineering days. The pressure of performance, the scrutiny of technical experts, the knowledge that lives might ultimately depend on his design decisions. There's still the matter of the information leak, he pointed out. Have your security measures yielded any results? Harper's expression tightened. Yes, though not what I expected. The misinformation was accessed and downloaded as anticipated, but not by Howard directly. Someone using his credentials. His assistant, Harper confirmed, a young man named Alex Reynolds who joined the team 6 months ago. Our security surveillance showed him accessing Howard's computer after hours using a password he shouldn't have known. Mason frowned. Have you confronted him? Not yet. I wanted absolute confirmation first. This morning, our intelligence sources reported that Rothschild's team has suddenly incorporated our deliberately flawed design element into their prototype. The trap worked. What happens now? Harper's eyes hardened with a coldness Mason hadn't seen before. Now we address the situation. Reynolds will be terminated immediately, of course, and will provide evidence of industrial espionage to the procurement committee, demonstrating that Rothschild's design is based on stolen intellectual property. The calculated precision of her response reminded Mason of the formidable businesswoman he had first encountered at Rodri Motors, someone who anticipated threats and neutralized them with ruthless efficiency. It was jarring after days of seeing Harper's more human side at Lily's bedside. What about Howard? Mason asked. His credentials were compromised. Will there be consequences for him too? Harper sighed some of the hardness leaving her expression. That's more complicated. Howard's been with Lancaster Logistics for 15 years. His negligence with security protocols is concerning but not malicious. He'll face disciplinary action, but not termination. The measured response reassured Mason. Harper's approach was firm, but not vindictive, proportional to the offense, rather than driven by anger or betrayal. We should get back to the hospital, he suggested, checking his watch. Lily will be wondering where we are, and she has final preoperative tests this afternoon. Harper nodded, already gathering her things. Of course, I've instructed legal to handle the Reynolds situation. Our focus should be on Lily now. The shift from corporate intrigue to personal concern happened so naturally that Mason barely noticed it, another indication of how thoroughly their separate worlds had merged in recent days. As they drove to the hospital, he found himself thinking about what would happen after Lily's procedure, after she recovered, after the immediate crisis passed. Would they return to the guest house on Harper's estate? Would he continue consulting on the guidance system project? Would Harper remain part of their lives, or would she retreat behind her corporate walls once the emergency that had brought them together was resolved? The questions remained unasked as they arrived at the hospital, where Lily was waiting with eager anticipation for their return. She had drawn a picture of the three of them, stick figures labeled Daddy, Me, and Miss. Harper, standing beside what appeared to be the heart delivery plane from Harper's story. For after my operation, Lily explained, presenting the drawing to Harper with solemn ceremony. When I'm all better and we can fly the special planes together. Harper accepted the drawing with matching solemnity, though Mason noticed her fingers trembling slightly. Thank you, Lily. I'll keep this in my office to remind me why the work we're doing matters. The afternoon brought final consultations and preparations. Dr. Chen reviewed the procedure once more, confirming that everything was proceeding as planned for Tuesday morning. The foundation paperwork had been processed, removing the financial concerns that would otherwise have overwhelmed Mason. All that remained was the waiting the interminable hours before entrusting his daughter to surgical intervention. Evening found them gathered in Lily's room, the atmosphere both tense and hopeful. Mason had brought dinner from Lily's favorite restaurant, a special pre-surgery treat approved by Dr. Chen. Harper had contributed a small gift, a plush toy shaped like a heart with a tiny bandage strategically placed where Lily's pacemaker would be. So your heart has company while it learns to work with its new helper, Harper explained as Lily examined the gift with delight. As Lily played with her new toy, Mason and Harper stood by the window, watching darkness settle over the city. The hospital lights cast their reflection against the glass, two figures standing closer than professional association would typically allow. Thank you, Mason said quietly, for all of this. I'm not sure Lily and I would have made it through this week without you. Harper shook her head slightly. You would have. You're stronger than you realize, Mason. You've been carrying this burden alone for years. Maybe, he acknowledged, but having someone to share it, even temporarily, it makes a difference I hadn't expected. Harper turned to face him fully, her expression unusually vulnerable. What happens after when Lily recovers and you've fulfilled your consulting obligations? The question echoed Mason's own unasked thoughts from earlier. I don't know, he admitted. I hadn't planned beyond getting through this procedure. Would you consider, Harper hesitated, seeming uncharacteristically uncertain. Would you consider a more permanent arrangement? Not just as a consultant, but as head of engineering for the Emergency Response Division. The position would include continued housing on the estate, comprehensive medical benefits for Lily, flexibility to accommodate her needs. The offer was professionally generous, but Mason sensed underlying currents that had little to do with business considerations. And personally, he asked, voice low to prevent Lily from overhearing, what happens with this? He gestured vaguely between them, indicating the undefined connection that had developed. Harper's composure wavered, a rare moment of genuine emotional transparency. I don't know, she admitted. I haven't allowed myself to think beyond professional parameters for a very long time. But I find that I value your presence, both of you, more than I anticipated. It wasn't a declaration of romantic interest exactly, but it was perhaps the most honest, emotional acknowledgement Harper Lancaster was capable of after years of deliberate emotional isolation. Mason recognized the courage it had taken to admit even this much. Let's get through tomorrow first, he suggested gently. After Lily's recovery, we can talk about what comes next professionally and personally. Harper nodded, relief visible in the slight relaxation of her shoulders. A sensible approach, one step at a time. On their conversation was interrupted by a nurse arriving to begin Lily's preoperative preparations medications, to take instructions to review consent forms requiring final signatures. The practical demands of the moment pushed the more complex emotional questions aside, though they remained present as an undercurrent beneath the medical procedures. As the final preparations concluded and Lily settled in for her last night before surgery, Mason found himself facing the familiar anxiety of a parent whose child faces medical intervention, the helplessness, the fear, the desperate hope that everything will proceed as planned. Harper seemed to sense his turmoil, her presence beside him steady and unobtrusive. She's going to be fine, Harper said quietly as Lily drifted toward sleep. Dr. Chen is the best in her field, and Lily is stronger than children twice her size. Mason nodded, clinging to these reassurances despite the fear gnawing at his stomach. I know. Logically, I know. But logic has little to do with how we process fear for those we love. Harper finished echoing his own words from days earlier. I understand. I'll stay tonight if you'd like. You shouldn't have to wait alone. The offer touched Mason deeply, not just for its practical support, but for what it revealed about Harper's emotional investment in their situation. The Ice Queen CEO had thawed considerably over the past week, revealing warmth and compassion he suspected few people were ever allowed to witness. I'd appreciate that, he admitted. Lily would too. As night settled over the hospital, Mason found unexpected comfort in Harper's quiet presence. She worked on her tablet while he alternated between restless dozing and anxious wakefulness, neither of them speaking much but drawing strength from shared vigilance. In those quiet hours, watching over his sleeping daughter with Harper Lancaster beside him, Mason realized how profoundly his life had changed in the span of a single week. What had begun as a job offer, a simple economic transaction between employer and employee, had evolved into something far more complex and meaningful. Whatever tomorrow brought, whatever decisions lay ahead after Lily's recovery, one thing was certain: barriers between their worlds had dissolved beyond restoration. The mechanic and the CEO, the widower and the divorcee, the single father and the isolated executive, these labels no longer defined the boundaries of their interaction. They had become, against all expectations, partners in the most fundamental human endeavor, protecting a child, ensuring her future, creating systems that supported life rather than merely facilitating commerce. In that shared purpose, they had found unexpected common ground, a foundation for whatever might come next. As dawn approached, bringing the anxiety of surgery day with it, Mason found himself less afraid than he had expected. Beside him, Harper Lancaster, the woman who had once mockingly offered to marry him if he fixed her car, had become something he had never anticipated, an ally, a support, perhaps even a friend. Someone who understood both his technical mind and his father's heart, who recognized the connection between fixing broken machines and healing broken lives. Whatever the future held, that understanding would remain a bridge between worlds that had seemed impossibly distant just days before. And in that bridge, Mason found unexpected hope, not just for Lily's recovery, but for possibilities he had long since abandoned as unattainable dreams. Morning light crept through the hospital blinds, illuminating the beginning of a day that would change everything. Mason straightened in his chair, ready to face whatever came next, not alone as he had been for so long, but with unexpected strength beside him. The journey ahead remained uncertain, a path unclear, but for the first time in years, he looked toward the future with something approaching optimism. Lily stirred, eyes opening to the day of her procedure. "Is it time?" she asked, voice small but steady. "Almost, lily-pad," Mason confirmed, moving to her side. "Are you ready?" Lily nodded, reaching for his hand. Then, surprising both adults, she extended her other hand toward Harper. "Will you both be there when I wake up?" Harper took the offered hand without hesitation, her normally composed features soft with emotion. "We will," she promised. "Both of us." The simple pledge contained multitudes of commitment, connection, continuity beyond the immediate crisis. Whatever came next, they would face it together, bound by something stronger than professional obligation or economic necessity. As the pre-operative team arrived to prepare Lily for surgery, Mason and Harper exchanged a glance of perfect understanding. The world's most sophisticated emergency response system couldn't compare to the power of simply being present when needed. Most of showing up, staying steady, refusing to retreat when circumstances grew difficult. In the end, that was the most valuable skill either of them possessed, not technical expertise or business acumen, but the capacity to remain when others would flee, to face fear without flinching, to fix what was broken through sheer determination and unwavering commitment. It was, after all, what had drawn them together in the first place, two people who refused to accept that some things couldn't be fixed, who saw broken systems as challenges rather than defeats, who believed that with enough patience, skill, and heart, even the most damaged machinery could be restored to purpose. As Lily was wheeled towards surgery, Mason and Harper followed as far as they were permitted, their hands briefly touching in a gesture of mutual support. The journey ahead remained uncertain, but for the first time in longer than either could remember, they faced that uncertainty not as isolated individuals, but as something new and unexpected. A team forged in crisis, tempered by shared purpose, stronger together than either had been alone. The future, with all its complexity and challenge, awaited them beyond the surgical doors. But whatever it held, they would meet it with the same determination that had brought them to this moment, the mechanic and the CEO, united by a child's heart and their own shared conviction that with the right tools, the right knowledge, and enough care, even the most daunting problems could be solved together.